You're listening to Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free. And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Ha! Ho! What's up, everybody? What is up? Fade to Black. That's right. It's Thursday, February 13th. Not Friday the 13th. It is Thursday, February 13th, 2014. 44 days into the new year. How is everybody? Welcome. We are live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in Burbank, California. For KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your host, Jimmy Church. Welcome. And you know how I start off every show. Started off with a big, proud salute to the men and women in uniform all around the world, fighting the good fight for us. Without them, there is no me, there is no you, there is no us. And you can't hear me right now. Think about it. Let's get this show cracking, everybody. We got a good one tonight. Happy birthday to Peter Tork of the Monkees. Yeah. 72 years old. He was my favorite monkey, by the way. Wasn't Davy Jones. Peter Tork, 72 years old. Peter Gabriel, two Peters today, by the way. Peter Gabriel shocked the monkey, 64 years old. But that's not all. Also, the craziest man alive. His birthday is today. Chuck Yeager, 91 years old. He was the first human to break the sound barrier on October 14th, 1947. That's right, 1947. Think about it. He flew the experimental Bell X-1, a tin can with a rocket engine, at Mach 1 at 45,000 feet. That man became the hero of every young boy on planet Earth. Chuck Yeager, 91 years old. Seriously, the craziest man alive. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Everything is Fade to Black. J Church Radio, Jimmy Church, KJCR. You know what to do. Follow, like, subscribe. And if you are on artbell.com right now, if you're on Dark Matter Radio Network, that means you're on my page. And it says Fade to Black. You're looking at it. All the links are right there. Follow, like, and subscribe. And it's important that you subscribe to the YouTube channel, because if you can't catch this show live, and it is live, then you can go and catch anything on YouTube. Everything is posted. And most of the shows that are posted, or we're trying to, all of the illustrations and photographs and pics and JPEGs and all the stuff that we use during the show are in those videos. And if they're not in the videos, then they're still live on the website, and we've got the matching pages up. So if you feel like you've missed something, you haven't. It's all still there. Tonight we have open lines all night. I'll be taking your calls during the entire show. That number is 323-825-5045. We have two guests tonight. And if you'd like to jump in with a quick question for either, the number is 323-825-5045. You can always Skype us at Fade to Black 14 at jimmychurchradio.com. All the information is there. Everything. That is an interactive website. It's done for you. It's not done for anybody else but the listeners of this show. Love sitting in for Art Bell. Waiting for his return. Hey, did everybody see his post, by the way, that he shot out there on Facebook? It's pretty interesting if you haven't read it. Keith, if you're listening, Maybe we should post that at jimmychurchradio.com. Let me know if that's cool. All right. The bumper music tonight, as always, is Doug Aldrich. Thank you, Doug. You can email me throughout the show, Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. You know, the producers here at KJCR filter everything, but all the good stuff does get through to me. And if it has to do with the guest and it's a question, I will read it on the air, of course. And if it's something really cool, I'll just read it anyway. And if it's really, really cool, I'll write back. All right. Let's see. What else we got going on? The Mayan viewer is up. Still up. As always, that is the reason to have the internet, besides this show, by the way. The new forums page, I will jump in tonight after the show and hang out with everybody. Stan's blog, again, Stan Anderson, jimmychurchradio.com. Go check it out. Over at artbell.com, by the way. Over at artbell.com right now. You've got to see this. Are you ready? They have found the Loch Ness Monster. Here, let me repeat that. Let's rewind. They have found the Loch Ness Monster. That's right. You can go to artbell.com right now and see the Loch Ness Monster. Yeah, you think I'm kidding? I saw it myself. All right. Let's see. What do we got going on? Okay. Tonight we have two guests. And first up, we're going to have George Hansen, who's an author. He's a finder of truth. He's also a magician. And we're going to look into one of the greatest UFO abduction hoaxes of all time. And I'm going to set this up in a little bit, but this story, and if you're new to ufology, if you're under the age of 30, you may not have heard about this case, but it rocked the media world. And this case was so big at one point, it drove everybody nuts. And we're going to bring that to you tonight. And it's a crazy story. And so we'll have George Hansen in. And again, we will be taking your calls if somebody has any questions for George, and you just might. Okay, so the lines are open. Next up, second half of the show, we've got Harry Drew. And everybody knows Harry. Everybody loves Harry. Harry Drew out of Kingman, Arizona. And Harry is, not only is he an author and a researcher and museum curator and lost civilization historian guy, but he has been covering and investigating the Kingman, Arizona crash landing site, which involves 11 UFOs, 1 landed, 2 crashed, 44 ETs, 6 were taken alive, 4 dead, 2 escaped. It's a crazy, crazy story. But not only that, but Harry took a couple of pictures this week in his backyard. And those pictures are posted at jimmychurchradio.com. And one of the pics is a saucer lying on the desert floor in his backyard. His backyard is 35 miles of open desert. Wait until you see this picture and the other ones. And I think we're holding him back until Harry comes on. I don't know if they're up at jimmychurchradio.com right now. And I'm sure I'm going to get a note in here in a second from the producer saying they're not. But they will be by the time Harry is on the show. And it's incredible. Absolutely incredible. So with that, we're going to take a quick break. As always, let's get the first commercial break out of the way. And when I come back, we will have George Hansen and the Linda Napolitano story. And it is a good one. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church, sitting in for the great Art Bell on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Shoot me an email to Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. It's going to be a great show tonight. Don't touch that mouse. I'll be back with George Hansen right after this. Stay with us, everybody.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National tax experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, welcome back. KJCR, Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Welcome, everyone. Got a great show lined up tonight. Shoot me an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. You know what to do. We use non-NSA, specially encrypted servers on the website. If you're scared, email us there. Follow us on Twitter at jchurchradio. Monitor Twitter all night long. All right. Got a busy show, so let's just get straight to it. George P. Hansen is an author of The Trickster and the Paranormal. He was professionally employed in parapsychology laboratories for over 8 years, 3 at Rhine Research Center in Durham, North Carolina, and 5 at the Psychophysical Research Laboratories in Princeton, New Jersey. His experimental work covered remote viewing, card guessing, Gans field telepathy, mental effects on electronic random number generators, and ghosts. He has been active in a number of psychic UFO and New Age organizations. He has helped found a skeptics group. His papers in scientific journals have covered mathematical statistics, fraud and deception, the skeptics movement, conjurers and parapsychology, and exposés of hoaxes. I would like to welcome to the program right now, George P. Hansen. George, are you there?
Yes, Jimmy, thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. And the P is in George P. Hansen because there's so many George Hansens out there. You just want to separate yourself from all the other guys out there, the other hoaxers.
Right. Yes.
Welcome to the show. That's a really nice bio, and it's heavy, but and the subject that we're going to cover tonight, which is the good Linda Napolitano. I know I'm going to set that up in a second, but with that kind of pedigree for yourself, I'm sure that it enables you to just dive into this and be able to do the research, but also, respect from your peers when you present this kind of stuff.
Well, I don't know if I get that much respect these days. Anyone who gets involved with hoaxes is going to be looked down upon a little bit.
Well, yeah,
it is fun.
Yeah, especially from the hoaxer themselves.
Right.
Yeah, getting stuff blown out of the water. Now, really quick before I get into the setup of Linda. I would like for you to you and I have talked all week, and I have been following your stuff for years, and therefore, you being on the show and giving me the opportunity to talk to you directly again about this means a lot, and I find her story so compelling, and it just sucks you in, and it did to me and the rest of the world from day one. And the story is so remarkable that I know that everybody listening to the show that has never heard of the story before is just going to be riveted because it's a crazy story. Crazy, fantastical story. But for everybody else out there that is familiar with it, now they're going to get to hear from you directly, and they probably read your papers and research and books already on the subject before. So, and if anybody out there would like to call in, the number 323-825-5045. Keep your questions brief. We're going to have George on for the next hour, commercial free. So, if anybody would like to pop in a quick question, we can do that. Just keep it brief. Because we have a lot to cover tonight. Okay, so George, how did you? You're a magician. You're into ufology. I believe you're a member of MUFON. I think you mentioned to me earlier this week you had a MUFON meeting last night, right, in New Jersey?
We had a local UFO meeting. I have been a member of MUFON. I am not currently.
Okay.
But I've been attending our local UFO meeting for a quarter century now.
Exactly. So you know a lot about this subject. What, when you were growing up, did you grow up in New Jersey, by the way?
Oh, no, I grew up in North Dakota.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, all of your friends and all of your researchers, everybody is in New Jersey. So I was just assuming all of these years that you have been working and living in New Jersey. I just thought you grew up there. But
Oh no, I've lived in quite a few places. Minnesota, North Dakota, Colorado, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, North Carolina, Michigan, and now New Jersey.
And you've been in New Jersey for?
It's going on 30 years.
Okay, so that counts. You're from New Jersey by now. Oh, so how did it happen? And all of the listeners of this program, they know how I set up every single interview, but I want to hear it from everybody. What happened that turned your life into this type of research and focus? You know, hoaxes and magic and UFOs. That's a broad stroke of the pen.
Well, back in the 70s in this country, there was really an occult or paranormal explosion. There was just huge interest in it. And there were courses offered. I was living in Kansas City, Missouri at the time, and there was a free university that offered courses on reflexology, astrology, dowsing, witchcraft, almost any paranormal topic you could think of. And I had just gotten out of college and said, well, hey, my father always claimed he could douse for water. In fact, he dug a well and doused a well and dug it, and all the neighbors were kind of surprised that he struck water. My mom wasn't really sure if she believed him or not. So, you know, we kind of laugh about it. And so there was this course on dowsing in Kansas City, Missouri, and I took it, and it was taught as it might be a psychic skill. And that just opened the doors for a lot of different things. And I took other classes and said, well, gee, I didn't learn anything about any of this stuff in engineering school in my physics classes. What's going on here? So I started reading the literature and started reading the skeptics' attacks on claims of psychic phenomena, along with the claims that these phenomena were real. And I go back and forth. And eventually I started reading more of the scientific literature, and eventually wound up in Durham, North Carolina, and studied at the Rhine Research Center at a summer program, and a few months later, I took a job there. And the rest, I just kept on and have had this really strong interest in these phenomena, in sort of a wide variety of things, because I knew that magic was important, because there was a fair number of instances of fraud and trickery among the people who claimed to have psychic ability.
Right.
And so I had to learn that. And then I kept that interest, and not that many people at the time in professional parapsychology had much interest in magic. That has changed somewhat. So I was one of the, not by no means the first, but one of the more active people in exposing hoaxes and critiquing experiments from that standpoint.
Are you allowed into casinos in Las Vegas?
I am. I'm really not much of a performer. I do have a brother who has been a professional gambler, and he is not allowed in many casinos. So there is sort of some kind of family tendency to odd or offbeat topics, I guess. But I have studied the history of magic as a child. I did do magic shows, but I certainly wouldn't consider myself a performer.
We can, and this is just an opportunity for me to ask somebody like yourself this question, and I would shoot myself if I didn't, and let you get away. Can you guess cards? Can anybody?
There have been some people who've done quite well at it, and in certain experiments many years ago, I was fairly successful in affecting predicting electronic random numbers. So, yeah, there are those abilities. I have seen plenty of evidence in my own experiments and in experiments of others that some people do have some of these abilities.
Really? I wanted you to say yes. All right. Okay. All right. Now let's just jump into it. We have, we've got a decent amount of time, and we can probably get the entire story in on both sides of the fence if we jump into it right away. So let's get started. And again, this is just a conversation. We're just sitting in my living room and talking. Except for tonight, this is about. I'm gonna use the word. Alleged abduction, because there are enough people like yourself out there that have exposed this as being an elaborate hoax, and that's your position tonight. I'm going to be on Linda's side of the fence, and I will do my best to try to defend Linda, and I'm going to try to get through it. But the case is a crazy one, and it's deep, and it's very, very involved with, some very high-level political figures, as well as the CIA and FBI and just downtown Manhattan. And the other thing is this, it wasn't just the public, as you know. I mean, it was every magazine and media outlet in Manhattan got sucked into this too as well. And Bud Hopkins. So let me set this up. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. She claims that she was abducted by aliens from her 12th floor apartment in the Lower East Side in November of 1989. Now, what she says is that these ETs came into her room, levitated her, sucked her out the window, and her and the ETs went up into a beam on the street, and the saucer, the craft, was above her apartment building, and brought her into the craft. She said that there were witnesses on the street, 3 witnesses a couple of blocks away. One of the witnesses was the United Nations Secretary General at the time, with his bodyguard Secret Service staff. And also that I think there was another witness on the Brooklyn Bridge. And I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the Brooklyn Bridge hits that part of Lower Manhattan. And so the traffic and everything that was supposedly backed up at that time because of the Secretary General's motorcade, this witness from the bridge was able to see her apartment window too at the same time. Is that correct?
I can't remember if she could see the actual window, but certainly she claimed to be able to see Linda floating up in the air. And this was at 3:16 a.m.
Right,
so
right.
Early morning.
Okay, so that's the setup. That's the general, very, 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 very general outline of this story, because it gets into weird sexual stuff, kidnapping, abductions, the beach house. It gets way, 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 way out there. Now, also, I will say this. Linda is still alive, and she may be listening to this show. I don't know. And if she is, The number, Linda, is 323-825-5045. We'd love for you to call in. Okay, so let's, how did you originally hear about the case?
I heard about it through my colleagues. Richard Butler, who helped to write the paper we produced, was an abductee himself. And he went up to Bud Hopkins' UFO abductee support group and met Linda there. And then he and Joe Stefula were regulars at our local UFO meeting in Hamilton, New Jersey. And, we were friends. And so they talked about this case. And eventually I got more and more involved. So it was basically through Richard Butler I heard it, who was an abductee himself.
I got you. And how did Joseph get involved?
Well, Joe and Rich were both in the military, and they were kind of buddies. So Stefula was chief warrant officer, U.S. Army. Was retired, and he had worked in the Criminal Investigation Command at Fort Dix. So he knew a lot of law enforcement people, and Linda was particularly concerned about her personal safety, or so she said. So Richard Butler talked to Joe, and they went up and talked with Linda to get her story.
Okay, so let's start before that. Let's start with her original statements about what happened in her room. Let's start there.
Okay, I can't remember all the details of the room, but that morning, she claims to have floated out of her apartment and up into the flying saucer. And then that saucer went into the East River. And then eventually she wound up on a beach. Now, the full details of her experience in her apartment, I suspect, are almost certainly in Bud Hopkins' book, Witness, but I don't recall those off the top of my head. Okay,
I think we have them ready now. Over at jimmychurchradio.com, there is a gallery on the homepage. There's 5 or 6 pictures there, and a couple of them, I believe, are drawings of Linda's during her regression with Bud Hopkins. If I'm wrong, it doesn't matter. It is what it is. The case is just too fantastic to know every detail. But you can go over there, and there are some illustrations of her floating out of the window, and there's also a map of the Lower East Side with where each witness was in proximity to Linda's apartment where the abduction or the alleged abduction had happened. Okay, so you can reference that as you're listening to George. So she, how did she go public with this originally?
Well, there was Bud Hopkins had talked about this to several journalists. And then at the 1992 MUFON conference, I believe that was out in New Mexico, she got up on stage with Hopkins and talked about her abduction experience and the problems she was having with, and I can't remember exactly the full details of what she said during that, but she identified herself. She stood up publicly in front of about 800 people and talked about her experience. And part of that experience was the problems with these bodyguards of Perez de Cuellar, alleged bodyguards of Perez de Cuellar, who had kidnapped her.
Now, at that time, Bud Hopkins was nearly at his peak as far as investigating, his respect was there. Everybody would listen to everything. And here he brings Linda into the fold, brings her to that conference, so everybody is going to stand up and listen.
That's right. Bud had enormous public visibility. He was on TV shows. There were articles written on him. He was by far the best-known researcher of the UFO abduction phenomena. And I do give him a lot of credit. Now, Bud didn't charge the abductees. He was certainly very compassionate toward them and really wanted to help them. He thought this was an extremely important phenomenon. And frankly, I agree with him. I believe that Bud was totally sincere in what he was doing. And I have a number of very, very close friends who've had the UFO abduction experience. I do not dismiss it. I believe it's quite important.
Absolutely.
As did Bud. So when one is trying to be a therapist and compassionate, one can be a little bit more vulnerable to hoaxes. That just goes with the territory. Bud wants to believe them, wants to help them. He is not going to be so detached. I was more detached and analytical. As a therapist or someone trying to help, that's a very difficult position to take. So I give Bud Hopkins a lot of credit for what he was trying to do.
Now, the two, there's a little time delay in the story in that she came out and went public. But the two Secret Service guys, they didn't surface till about a year later. Is that correct?
That's right. I think it was the abduction took place in November 1989, and it wasn't till like January or February of 1991 that they made contact with Bud, and it was via a letter. They didn't go hunt down Linda. They contacted Bud Hopkins. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
I don't believe these two people, Richard and Dan, actually existed as persons, but Bud got a letter from them.
Now, so let's back up. I think I wanted to make that really clear because there is a list of witnesses and everything, but from her initial story and what was done at the conference and then what followed later, there was about a year gap in there. Am I correct?
Well, there was a year gap between the abduction experience and then the emergence of these two Secret Service or dignitary protective people. And then after Hopkins got the letter, the case really started to take on a life of its own.
Okay. And at that point, and now we're going to get back to the story, but at that point, was the Secretary General of the United Nations involved yet?
Well, I don't know that his name came up. He was originally referred to as the third man.
Right.
And in Hopkins' book, that's how he is referred to.
And you're talking about the book Witness.
Witness.
Right.
So I'm not sure exactly when the name came out, but Linda Napolitano did talk to Richard Butler and Joe Stafula and did confirm that it was allegedly Javier Perez de Cuellar being the third man.
And he was from Chile, I think? Chile? Argentina?
Right.
Chile?
I'm not absolutely sure.
Okay, Secretary General.
Yes.
Okay, so now let's get back to the story. So she, when she was at this conference, what was the story that she started to unravel for everybody there? Were they still called the witnesses at that point? Was the beach house involved? And tell what did she say at the conference?
I don't have a recording of that, so I can't give. I may have some recordings someplace in my files. One of the people who was very helpful in providing some of the information was Philip Klass.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was quite a bit of information on the case, I believe, before she took the stage at the conference. Hopkins was writing about this. He was talking to media about the case.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to get some kind of timeline down for the events.
Okay, I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
My article, my first big article was 25 pages, and I have not prepared a timeline to give to you. I mean, just going back, I spent some hours today just going back and reading through my notes and my articles, and so I can't really give you a full timeline. That would take
because the case takes a long. It is so involved, and
yes.
Okay. So, but what I want to try to establish here is when did she start with Bud Hopkins the stories about the second. Okay, well let's get to it. She said that, and I'll let you tell the story, but that she was then followed by these two Secret Service agents. She was contacted by one of them. I'll let you tell the story, and then abducted her. And all of this happened after the alien abduction.
Yeah, the alien abduction took place November 30th, 1989. And it wasn't until early 1991 that Bud Hopkins first got a letter from Richard and Dan, these alleged Secret Service or government agents who were protecting Javier Perez de Cuellar. After Hopkins got the letter, they established contact with Linda herself. And during one of the times, and it may have been the first, they allegedly kidnapped her and drove her around Manhattan. She claimed to be quite traumatized by this. Later on, there were other contacts with her, and Richard and Dan actually had claimed that they were very traumatized by witnessing the UFO abduction back in '89. And in fact, that Dan had been put in some type of mental institution or rest home because he was so traumatized. Later on, both of them reappeared, and during one of the escapades, Linda was taken out to Long Island to some beach house by Dan, and her head was being thrust under the water as though Dan was trying to drown her. Eventually, some kind of force was manifested and threw him back on the beach. I believe Richard showed up. Eventually, Richard and Linda established some type of romantic type of liaison. It wasn't really clear just how far that went, but allegedly Richard and Linda had been abducted many times earlier in their lives together.
Right.
So it gets quite involved, and the Hopkins book is really quite fun to read. It gives a lot of detail, and Hopkins reproduces a number of the letters he got from Richard and Dan, as well as a letter or more from Javier Perez de Cuellar, allegedly from Javier Perez de Cuellar. They're quite interesting to read. The letter from the UN Secretary General doesn't sound like it would come from someone in his position, but it's in the book.
Now, also, and my next question is going to be, how did, as you started to research this, what started to tip you off, and how did this whole thing start to unravel? But for me, there was a few things that were pretty standout. Everything that she had as evidence either disappeared, wasn't around, doesn't know a last name, doesn't know where the house, doesn't, everything that would corroborate this entire story never surfaced.
Yeah, that's right. These two agents, Richard and Dan, didn't have last names, didn't contact anyone else but Linda, as far as we can tell. So she was sort of the channel for all these messages. Bud Hopkins was able to set up a short meeting with the UN Secretary General, and during that meeting, which I believe was briefly at Chicago O'Hare,
right?
Perez de Cuellar denied knowing anything about this case. Hopkins took the denial as sort of evidence in favor of the case. Richard and Dan, I believe, sent Hopkins a number of letters as well as gifts, but never would talk to him directly face to face.
And why didn't Bud, and I know he spoke about this a little bit, but why didn't he start to raise an eyebrow early on in the case when, I understand why the Secretary General would be in a position of denial. Of course. All right. If the event was real, he's not going to admit to anything or admit to being a part of or witness anything. I can understand that. But for Bud, why didn't, as you know, that nothing, nothing materialized for him, and I mean, why didn't he, later on he spoke about this, but why didn't he at that time, do you think, just not pull the plug on this and start to question her?
Okay, that's sort of a psychological question, and I will speculate a little bit. But first of all, Bud was in a very, very publicly prominent position. He was extraordinarily active and extraordinarily well-known. He was totally committed to the reality of this phenomena. And to some degree, you almost have to be to take a position like Bud's.
Right.
There's going to be people throwing mud at you and stones and insulting you day in and day out. You've got to have a very, very firm commitment. And I think Bud had that. And his commitment was to help these people. And he was not going to back down. So when you're in that kind of public position, it's kind of hard to back down on these kinds of things. And Bud also is he's very good with words. I've read his memoir that he published some years later, and it's a fascinating read. It is the only book in the last maybe 20 years that I read every darn page of that book. He is a captivating writer.
Yes, it is a great book.
And I think he can get into the story himself. I think, like Whitley Strieber, they're both very gifted verbally, and they get into these stories. I think Strieber has a little bit more capability of kind of standing back, but I'm not sure Bud had that.
Well,
but Bud was very tenacious, and I give him a lot of credit, but I think there's some weaknesses there, and he was unwilling to face the possibility that he was wrong, in a sense.
Now,
he was very committed to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which I think was also a weakness.
Well, and again, I don't want to. I'm not talking bad about Bud Hopkins at all, because you are absolutely correct when you say that was a man that was dedicated to his craft, and he really wanted to get to the bottom of this, and he was very compassionate. And no doubt was gifted with the pen, because he scared the crap out of me with a couple of books, and including and she even admitted to reading Intruders many years before too.
Yes.
And do you think, now you've met Linda, by the way?
Yes, several times. I can't say I know her well, but she is fun. I like her as a person. She is quite a character.
And how do you feel when you met her? Because she looks like anybody's mom or housewife from the East Coast. I mean, when you look at pictures of her, I could certainly see how she would have sucked Bud in too as well, and everybody else around her, including the 800 people at that conference in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And did she have that same effect on you?
I didn't meet her. I met her well after I had all this other information. So I thought she was rather charming. As a person, I thought she was I kind of liked her. And I still have a certain respect for her of what she was able to accomplish, but I didn't believe her story. I think she has a certain cleverness and a certain gift that people tend to overlook.
And just about and you were in that area at that time, and just about, and when I say just about every magazine, newspaper, media outlet in Manhattan, which is the media center of the known universe, picked up on this story and ran with it. And do you think that because and for weeks, if not months, this story was all over the place, do you think that affected her too as well, and made things get more exaggerated?
Oh, it probably did. She was probably having great fun. I mean, she literally was dining with royalty at times. She was provided a bodyguard. There were real perks to this. No, she wasn't really scamming anyone out of a whole lot of money. But I think she was having a good time, and I don't fault her for that.
How did the case start to unravel? And you said a key thing about a minute ago. You know, you just didn't believe her story. You know,
the story kept getting more and more elaborate. The big thing, Joe Stafula, who was my colleague on this case, when he heard about these two agents,
right,
said, "Well, no, all the New York City police and all agents he knows, and he worked in law enforcement for decades." He said, "No, those guys would be running up the stairs trying to find out what was going on. They weren't not going to be scared and going to some kind of mental institution. No, cops, if there's a problem, they run toward the problem, not away from it."
Right.
So Stafula was immediately suspicious of the behavior described of Richard and Dan. So that started it. And then the fact that they would not talk to Hopkins directly, it was all through letters, was extremely suspicious to us. Those were the key issues right there. And Stafula, I remember hearing several times, that's not how New York City cops would be. They'd be running to those places. They'd be running up the stairs trying to find out where that happened,
right,
where the room was.
And we all know about New York's finest, okay?
Yeah.
And the last thing, well, you know what? Not only New York's finest, but the Secret Service in general, and I've had my experience. I can't go on the record right now and say how and what or when I was involved with the Secret Service, but I've had my background checked by the Secret Service. I've hung out with those guys. I can say that. I'm not going to say what it was about, but I've hung out with these guys. And I'll tell you what, if I'm in trouble, that's who I want in front of me.
You bet.
Period. And so that part of the story about a mental breakdown of his secrets, anybody that was an attaché, some kind of guard of the United Nations Secretary General, is not somebody that's going to mentally break down over nothing.
Right.
And so that part of the story. So was that the first thing that okay, so that was the first thing. What came next?
Well, as the story got more and more elaborate, and the tales of kidnapping, and then being taken out to the beach house. And the other thing that really caught our attention, we have a friend named Vincent Creevy, who was coming to the UFO meetings regularly, and he came across this novel called Night Eyes by Garfield Reeves Stevens. And he said, hey, there's sure a lot of parallels between this novel and the Linda case. And in fact, the novel was published not long before Linda started making these claims. And I went through the book and just pulled out quite a number of those commonalities. And in fact, on my website, my 25-page paper that I did with Butler and Stafula is there, along with the list of all those commonalities between the Linda Napolitano UFO abduction and the abductions in the Garfield Reeves Stevens book, Night Eyes.
Now,
so that was pretty damning.
Yes, and I have the list here. And the similarities, number one, Linda was abducted in a UFO hovering over a high-rise apartment building in New York City. Sarah was abducted in a UFO hovering over her high-rise building in New York City. Dan and Richard initially claimed to have been on a stakeout and were involved in a UFO abduction. Early in Night Eyes, 2 government agents were on a stakeout and became involved in a UFO abduction. Blah, 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 on and on and on. I've got the whole list here. It would take up the rest of the show tonight to just to go through the similarities. But did she ever go on the record about Night Eyes?
Not that I recall.
And you know she's read this paper.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
now after our papers came out, there was a fair amount of discussion on the internet. And I didn't save all that. I'm not sure I could retrieve very much of it anymore. But she may have said something at some point, but not directly to me.
Now, in all of this unraveled in real time, and I want to express to everybody that when this
all broke, and I'm going to guess here and say 93-ish to 94 is when the mayhem started with this on the internet. But back then, the internet was a different animal than it is today. There wasn't a way to search. There wasn't, there was no Internet Explorer. I forget what was back then, Netscape or whatever, people, Mosaic or whatever. But the internet was a different animal than it is today. And when this started to get out, your research was replicated on everybody else's website. In other words, there wasn't a whole lot of information about the case from her or from anybody else. And yours was very centralized, although very comprehensive and complete, but it was all we had. And I read it from top to bottom back then. How were you guys dealing with this like old style detectives, hitting the streets? How did you get your information?
Yeah, pretty much we were. In fact, Joseph Fula, myself, Antonio Huneos, and Rich Butler went up to New York City and went to the apartment house. The apartment building she's in has a very large courtyard and has a 24-hour guard there. We talked to the people in the guardhouse, asked them if they had any recollection of hearing anything about a UFO, especially anything that bright right above the building. Went over to the New York Post loading dock, talked to the people there, and talked to other people we could find. And so, yeah, it was. We weren't. I was not online at that time. I had typed up the papers that we were distributing, and we sent out dozens of copies to various people, and eventually that got online.
Why didn't everybody else do the same due diligence in vetting her and the story that you guys did?
Well, you got to realize ufology, the UFO field, is not really a professional field. And groups like MUFON are basically hobbyist organizations. They have, in effect, really no professional standards. The field is very, very marginal. So you've got a lot of people volunteering, people who are usually pretty well-meaning but have little training and relatively limited analytical skills.
Yes, yeah, maybe so, and I'm going to cut you off.
Okay.
But the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times.
Well, they don't go into any depth on those stories. They need something to fill, and the reports were fairly short. Now, later on, Patrick Huige did a much more in-depth article for Omni magazine.
That's right.
And he did talk to people, and he came away quite skeptical. But the other mentions of it were fairly short, and Bud was a pretty big name in the abduction area, probably the biggest name. Then John Mack was also very much coming into prominence at that time.
Right.
And Mack was backing him up. John Mack, who was the head of the psychiatry department at Harvard Medical School, formerly, also a Pulitzer Prize winner, that added a lot of credibility to Bud. And Mack, also like Bud, was very compassionate, very concerned about the well-being of the abductees. He was not a research scientist. He was a therapist. He did not do real scientific analytical type research.
What?
He was trying to help people.
And
not the best person for someone to rely on for boots on the ground research.
Right. And the other thing for me, and I remember this, it was so strong that you were being blocked and opposed everybody was standing behind her, and nobody really wanted you to maybe expose her. Is that the way you felt at the time?
Oh, well, actually, I have a lot of friends that I've had connections into the skeptics community for a long time, even though I had done a very extensive article on the whole skeptics movement and done some very critical pieces of skeptics. I still had a fair number of friends there. Also, within the UFO community, there is a minority of people who are rather skeptical and take sort of a lighthearted approach to it. One of my real heroes in the UFO field was a guy named Jim Moseley. Now, Moseley died recently, but he had put out a newsletter while he was for literally 59 years.
Saucer Smear.
So, yes. And
Loved
he was
it.
considered the clown prince of ufology.
Hey, there was nothing wrong with Moseley, my friend. Love that guy.
Moseley was wonderful. A fabulous guy to know at conferences. And Saucer Smear was a wonderful zine. And he was publishing our work.
And, I don't even think he ever owned a computer. He had I
don't think so. No,
he had a Smith Corona typewriter, old school, would type that up, make copies, put it in an envelope, slap a stamp on it, and that was the new issue of Saucer Smear.
And he did that for almost 60 years. Not 16, 60.
Exactly. Okay, so back to Moseley. Okay.
So, I'd been in touch with him for quite a while, and there were a few people in paranormal fields. Dennis Stillings, who put out journal and magazine Artifacts and Archaeus, certainly was very sympathetic. There were other people, Marcello Truzzi, who put out Zetetic Scholar. There were a number of people sort of in between the aggressive proponents and the real diehard debunkers. It wasn't a big group, but certainly we had our informal community and our networks. So, no, I felt really great. We were getting all this wonderful publicity, and I know that Jim Moseley and Phil Klass were both quite jealous of all the attention we were getting. So I didn't mind the negative publicity at all. I thought it was great fun.
And what about the opposition that you were getting from MUFON, their leadership, the Hynek Center for UFO Studies? Part of what I did eventually with this is try to analyze the whole field of ufology. And parapsychology has some of the same problems, but ufology has it more so, partly because it is really not professional. You've got a bunch of volunteers who are largely untrained and don't have a real scientific orientation. They are very well-meaning. They know this is important, but they don't really have the capacity to do real analytical work. So, fair enough.
So the problem is the organizations, if you're going to be a really good researcher, you've got to devote time to it. But most people really would rather run an organization, build up a membership base. And so the real capable researchers might probably not so inclined to build up a big membership organization. So there's always this tension between the people who are running the organizations and the people who are really doing the good research. And so in MUFON and the Hynek Center for UFO Studies, you saw the same thing. The people who were really trying to build up the membership would get the public prominence. Their names would be out front. The researchers who were actually doing the good work were sort of secondary. They may be very little known to the people who actually read the journals, who were subscribed.
Now,
so those could be easily dismissed. The people who were prominent, had the status, those are the people that the general public would follow.
How did you start to piece everything together, such as, the license plate number on the car that didn't exist, the audio tape that was sent to Bud Hopkins, and I believe that was with Dan and Richard, but, you don't know if that was Dan and Richard on the tape. I mean, how did you start to put the facts together on everything? Well,
actually, Hopkins was really quite open with what he was trying to do. He published a number of articles. He spoke at conferences. We got the audio tapes of what he was presenting. Bud, by and large, was not holding that much back. He certainly held some of the material back, and maybe he had good reason for it. But Bud was pretty open. And Linda would talk too, and there were other people. But primarily, we tried to rely on reports from Bud Hopkins and then started pointing out, okay, this doesn't quite add up, Bud. You need to respond to this, which he did not do. But Bud was getting a lot of support from other high-level people. Walt Andrus, the head of MUFON, was supporting him actively. Jerry Clark at the Hynek Center. David Jacobs, a professor of history at Temple University. John Mack was standing behind him. So I don't think Bud really felt that he had to respond that much to us. We were outsiders. We were little nobodies. Whereas he had all the big names behind him.
Completely. And that's my point that I want to drive home. She, on her side of the fence, our side of the fence, her side of the fence, she had anybody that she needed to have, all the big names, all of the, everybody continued to stand behind her. Even though, and this is what we need to drive home here, even though everything that she brought forward or everything that Bud received was just circumstantial stuff, a letter from the woman on the Brooklyn Bridge, or the audio tape, or the letter from Dan, or the letters from Dan, and nobody ever, you know what I mean? It was nothing.
Yes.
And I just don't understand why everybody continued to stand behind her and
well,
block.
they were standing behind her because Bud was standing behind her, and it got to be sort of groupthink. Now, to actually sit down and analyze these things takes some time. You've got to sit down with the journal articles or the magazine articles that Bud produced and start thinking about it. It's much easier to have a conversation, go to a conference and listen to Bud. Bud is very persuasive personally. He is very charismatic. But to really do this kind of research well, you have to sit down. You have to retreat into your little room and get all the information out and start analyzing it. You have to read and read things over and over. That takes a lot of time and thinking. Most people don't have the time to do that. They rely on other people. In almost all areas of our life, we rely on other authorities to tell us what is correct and what is really the truth. Same in ufology. You try to rely on the authorities. To sit down and analyze yourself takes time, and most people don't have that.
And then I want to get to these last few facts in the case as it's really started to get out of control. Then, of course, we have the implant and the nasal X-rays.
Yeah. This was a very amusing story. Linda had a niece, and just who she was and all the relevant details are kind of murky. But Linda had an X-ray taken of her nose, and it was very clear there was something very odd, some little curly-Q wire-type structure there. And the X-ray eventually, Bud Hopkins got a copy of it and showed it to people, and eventually it was even published in a medical newspaper, Advance for Radiological Science Professionals. Very clear that there was something there, either in her nose or on the side of the nose. We don't really know what the qualifications were of the person who took the X-ray. We don't have a statement from the doctor who was in charge of the X-ray. Bud just had the X-ray, and it showed a structure. Then if you examine Linda later, no, there was no indication of it. So Linda obviously didn't go to a lot of trouble to have this done. If she knew someone who knew how to run an X-ray machine and she could produce some evidence, it wouldn't be that difficult. But people took this as, really amazing evidence. Again, you have to look at the chain of evidence. Who took the X-ray? Where was it done? When was it done? What person was going to put their medical license on the line saying, yes, this is what we found? And no one did that.
And for me, it's like the coup d'etat in this whole case. Her spectacular blood, and the doctor that, well, you know what? I'll let you tell the story.
Oh, I can't remember. Yeah, you know, those are details. You know, this was more than 20 years ago.
Well,
you've been reading it as I have, and I can't recall that.
She claimed that she was a singer. Had some hit records and then lost her voice, went to go to a doctor and had the doctor told her that she had red blood cells that wouldn't die and that could rejuvenate themselves.
Oh, yes, there was something about that.
Yeah.
And also that she was some descendant that somehow of Joan of Arc.
Yes. And all of this was caused from Linda. I would love for you to call the show, by the way. 323-825-5045. Clear this up. That the magic blood that she had was given to her from the aliens as well. So, and like I said, the whole thing, it just got a little bit bigger, little bit bigger, little bit bigger, little bit bigger, and then you were forced to write this paper. And so how did that happen? You and Joe and Robert get together? You guys were already doing the investigation?
Yeah, Richard and Joe did more of the investigation than I did on the ground. And neither of them were much in the way of writing. And I've been writing for a while, and I just found this a fact. And they came to me. Joe asked me to help him write it up. So I sat down with them a number of times and wrote drafts and sent it to them for their comment. And as the case progressed, then Bud eventually did agree to have a meeting with us and he invited us up to his home, and there were a number of other people there. Walt Andrus was there, David Jacobs, and so I took notes at the meeting. He really was unable to answer our questions. One of the things we haven't gotten to yet is the investigation by the Secret Service. During the meeting, and Joe Stefula was the one who had suggested this, that because Linda had made public accusations against government agents for commission of felonies, anyone now could go to law enforcement authorities and request an investigation. That's what we did. I wrote to the Inspector General's office of the U.S. Secret Service describing the case, giving the names, addresses, and phone numbers of people who had inside information on the case, namely Walt Andrus, Jerome Clark, and Bud Hopkins. All those people were given evidence and shown evidence of the alleged perpetrators, who they were, and what they had done. Joe Stefula also called up the Secret Service and said, "Hey, we've got this case going on. Linda is claiming that the government agents have been kidnapping her and committing other felonies." Now, Joe was really deeply connected up and down the East Coast with law enforcement authorities, and he had remarkable access to them. He knew a lot of them personally. So eventually, someone, I think a couple people from the Secret Service, knocked on Bud Hopkins' door and asked to interview him about this. And Hopkins was absolutely furious. But
what do you know? What they said to each other and what they said to Hopkins?
I don't know exactly what they said, but eventually it appeared that the Secret Service determined that there was no reason to further investigate the case. But Hopkins certainly let it be known to some of his friends, who then talked to other people, that he was contacted by the Secret Service, and then basically he and Linda were sort of backtracking. Didn't really want to confront it, because the main point I hammered home in the fall of 1992, when a couple different short papers I presented, well, there were felonies committed by government agents. Someone should investigate. These felonies included kidnapping and attempted murder.
Right.
Thus, there should be a formal legal investigation, and Linda could make her claims to law enforcement authorities. Now, of course, if she made those claims about being kidnapped and the attempts on her life, and those were proved untrue, and then she was making them up, she could be subject to criminal prosecution. So here the rubber really hits the road. Is Linda Napolitano willing to state to law enforcement authorities that she was indeed kidnapped and that there were attempts made on her life? No, she was not willing to do that.
And
that really clinched the case for us.
Right.
And in fact, Hopkins, John Mack, Walter Andrus, all opposed any type of criminal investigation of this case, of government agents who were breaking the law, and they did not want an investigation of that.
Now, do you think, I'm just going to be devil's advocate here for a second, but if the reason for them taking that position is the case falls apart and book sales fall apart, that's the first thing, or is it because they didn't want their position is, we can't have names and places exposed in a trial, so it's better safe to leave all of that alone? Was that the position that they took?
No, none of the above. I don't believe any of those people were primarily motivated by money. Bud would have a little motivation, but not primarily. Bud was primarily concerned about the phenomena, and I document some of this in my article. Basically, these people had bought into the story, and they thought there was a government conspiracy.
Exactly.
Now, it doesn't make a whole lot of logical sense.
Yeah, so that's
from an outsider's standpoint.
Which is my
And
point.
so people suggest that they were motivated by money and worried about book sales. I don't believe that at all.
So their position,
I believe they had bought into this very odd conspiratorial mythology that didn't make any logical sense, but somehow resonated with them.
Which was my point number two. So you have point number one, is it because of money? There was a point number two that they didn't want this to go to a criminal trial because everything else would have to be exposed. It's a conspiracy anyway. Nothing's going to happen from it. We're going to stand behind her, and we're going to stick to our guns.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Fascinating case. So now, what kind of backlash, push and pull did you start to receive once you guys published all of your findings?
Both the MUFON UFO Journal and the IUR publication, which I forget the name offhand, both ran issues denouncing us. And some of the biggest names in ufology, including John Mack and Walt Andrus and Jerry Clark and Dave Jacobs and others, were rather vehement in their denunciations of what we did. Of course, Saucer Smear and Phil Klass loved what we had been doing, so they gave us some pretty positive feedback.
Right.
So, yeah, we got some negative comment, but we didn't really feel that they had addressed the issues we were raising.
Yeah.
So, now the long-term effect, I think there are still people who have doctoral degrees who are still promoting this case, but by and large, the case kind of slowly receded. But it is, I went online this evening and found a number of books where it is cited quite favorably. So it's not dead yet. It could be revived. But I think a fair number of people in the UFO field decide, well, maybe this isn't such a strong case after all.
Well, it would be the first case in history, and it'd be fine if it happened, and you would be fine with it too if Dan and Richard, came forward. Javier Perez, changed his story, and the license plate number surfaced, and if everything fell in, okay, all right, I would love it. I absolutely would applaud the entire thing and just go, you know what, fantastic, we needed this.
Yeah.
But it's been 25 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that is that. But Linda, anybody out there? You got the number. I'm not hiding. 323-825-5045. I want to thank you for coming on the show, George. It was wonderful, and would love to have you on again. And anytime. Come
All
on,
right.
Anytime. Nothing like your good old hoax story to to stir the pot, and that's what I'm here for. But thank you for coming on. If you want any information for Mr. Hansen's books, just click on his name at jimmychurchradio.com. It'll take you straight over to his website, and I know you keep it updated, or you try to. And good luck to you. And again, anything that you have, contact us if you have any updates on the story.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen. You have a great rest of your weekend.
You too.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. KJCR on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Thank you, George P. Hansen. When I come back, we're going to have Harry Drew on. Stay with us, everybody.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark Matter.
Dark Matter, Dark Matter, Dark Matter, Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Oh, yeah. Fade to Black. Fade to Black. KJCR on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Shoot me an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. We got the lines open. 323-825-5045. Thank you, George P. Hansen. That was amazing. Nothing like learning something, and that's why you are here. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Sitting in for the great R. Bell. Let's get right to it. Harry Drew resides in Arizona and is highly regarded for his professional ethic, impeccable credentials, and trusted results as an old-fashioned Indiana Jones type of researcher who takes his field work seriously and has an uncanny ability to ferret out the truth no matter how it has been distorted. Drew is a cultural resource specialist in ancient civilizations, a former director and curator of museums of history, anthropology, and archaeology, as well as being a newspaper columnist, author of history for the past 40 years. Drew is also an experienced documentarian with expertise in visual media, photography, television, and film production, also in the field of fine arts. I would like to welcome to the program live from Kingman, Arizona, Harry Drew. Harry, are you with us?
I'm here, Jimmy. How are you?
I am fantastic, and welcome to the program, first off. And I know that you've been on the road for the last, since early this morning.
It's been a year.
And it was funny talking to you today, and that you made it back home to Kingman. You were in Scottsdale over the last few days at a conference. And so you made it back to Kingman safe and sound.
Yes.
And welcome to the program. Welcome. Okay.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting listening to George.
George is the man. And the thing is, and with George, it's not about George, it's about you right now, Harry. But, he's done so much in his life. And the one thing that I bring him on the show is about, Linda and her experience in this hoax, because there's so much that you can just sit and talk to him about. He's just a fascinating guy. Fascinating. Okay. Now, really quick, I want to talk about a few different things with you tonight, Harry. And I have been fascinated with your research, and I've watched all of your videos over the years, and your diligence of Kingman, Arizona. And the thing is about Kingman, for me, Kingman is something that should be discussed just like Roswell or Kecksburg or Rendlesham or anything. Kingman should be in that same discussion. And why do you think, it's kind of like the redheaded stepchild when it shouldn't be, because it is one of the most fascinating incidents in ufology, don't you think?
Yes, it is. And more than I can ever, I think, be able to state the way I can grab everyone's attention where they really, really understand what I'm saying. It's definitely in a spot right in with Roswell. This Kingman UFO incident that happened in 1953 in May is something that a lot of deliberate effort has been applied to keeping quiet. And I can remember speaking with Rick Scholar. I don't know if you know who that is. Topic UFO show on Roku. And he asked me the same question. I said, why is that? And I said, that's a good point. Why is the Kingman story been suppressed all this time? And so I asked him back, and he said, because it's true. And I said, that's exactly right.
Well, that's a good point. Hey, Harry, really quick, can you adjust your headset microphone a little bit closer to your mouth for us really quick? Let's just
right.
Oh, there you are. There you are.
All right. I've kind of lost you, too.
Okay. So, yeah, exactly. And I had said at the top of the show, and this is one of the things about this case, there's 11 UFOs. You have crashes, you have ETs, you have dead ETs, you have 6 that were captured alive, 2 escaped from from law enforcement and were never found. It's just a crazy
they had
factual
2 in
case.
Custody.
Yeah, 2 in custody. Yeah.
Locked in a steel reinforced concrete vault below grade, below the surface of the ground. And the sheriff, this is 1953, 3,400 population. It's Mayberry, USA. And the sheriff was out, and they had to go get him, and 3 deputies and a Forest Service worker guarded a locked door, and there is absolutely no way out of this room. This room exists, and it's off limits to the public. And I just kind of jump in with this little story because this is the last of 3 of the UFOs during what I call 7 days in May in 1953. And these 2 ETs were locked in a room to be interrogated for committing arson because the disc they were in slammed into the north face of the Wallapai Mountain and set it on fire in front of everyone that lived in Old Town Kingman. And it's like this 42, I've been able to isolate 42 what we would all loosely call eyewitnesses, and 4 eyewitnesses who were firsthand, who actually touched the craft that landed. So that's not too bad, along with finding the site for that, by the way, in situ, which means everything was the way the Air Force left it. It's like I arrived the next day, but it was 60 years. But the 2 who were locked in were to be interrogated. Later, they called these room interrogation rooms. It's in the basement below grade of the 1914 Mojave County Courthouse, which is used by the court today for handling casework, and it's off limits. It's been that way for 3 decades. And I told the head of security for Mojave County Court a story that left out the ET part so he wouldn't throw me out. And I said, if I'm right in describing all of the things in this lower part of this building, would you just tell me yes or no? I needed to know that. Once I found out that where this place was still existed, I was stunned that was even the case.
Right.
And I told him the story, and he said, come with me. And he went and shut down all the alarm systems and walked me right up to where this was, and an oak bench sitting outside the door that a Forest Service worker sat on 60 years ago is still there. And I examined inside the room, and I was allowed to take photographs. Amazing. It was all there. The sheriff arrived in 1953, back on the 24th day of May, and the Forest Service worker briefed him on the fact that he found these two, as the newspaper reporters who saw them wrote down and called two strange-looking men, quote unquote, and that's on the front page of the newspaper. And their presence was recorded, of course, when they take anybody and incarcerate them or have them in custody. There's a mention they're in custody. So law enforcement did those types of things even then. So it's like more evidence when you do real, genuine research, scholarly type,
Right.
and even for UFOs. And the sheriff said, okay, open up. And they opened up the door and they stepped in, and this steel reinforced concrete vault, the ceiling, floors, all the sidewalls were solid concrete, no openings except for the door in and out that was locked and guarded by 3 deputies and a Forest Service worker, and the 2 ETs that were inside weren't there anymore. They according even to the front page of the paper. Who knew this? They vanished and put Harry Houdini to shame.
Right. And now,
amazing.
We're gonna do the entire Kingman case from start to finish here in just a second. I want everybody to really quick. Earlier this week, Harry, who doesn't do this, Harry's an investigator and a researcher, but he lives out on the edge of the desert in Kingman. And earlier this week, you snapped one of I would say incredible, but one of the best pictures I've seen in quite some time of a disc sitting on the desert floor. Is that right, Harry?
Yes, there were 2 of them actually.
Okay, and so the disc is sitting, but it's glowing, it's lit up, and how far? Okay, well, anyway, this photograph is on jimmychurchradio.com. It's on the front page of the homepage, and if you scroll down, you'll see it says Harry Drew. Actually, I haven't looked. I want to make sure that the producers have it up, but I'm assuming that they do. So let me just double check really quick before I say something that isn't quite right. And the picture looks like it's from a distance. And no, the picture. Oh yeah, it's here. Okay, so I don't know how to explain it, but it looks like it's how far away is this picture?
How many what?
How far away were you from this?
Within a mile. I'd say about a mile. We normally, my wife and I and friends that come to visit, we normally see these craft come and go out the back of what is like the back of my property. It's open out to 35 miles of flat, barren desert. And when there is activity in the area, that includes Kingman, some of the things that happen over on the east side of the mountain range next to me, because I'm between Kingman, I'm actually between 2 mountain ranges, very close. One's 6 miles to my east, the other is about 8 miles to the west. And when things are going on, I get some peripheral, maybe it's secondary craft, but they come here and I get different types. And I can't tell you that they are all extraterrestrial, but I can tell you this, they certainly aren't all military. And some of these things I can't distinguish. I told you a story about trying to, and I've had people on my Facebook page who've responded to this with some very interesting stories, and asking me, why did I try to get closer? No. I gave that up after I had an encounter. So I don't do that. I'm not that, I'm lucky, I think, that this happens. And that we get to see these things. I don't feel intimidated, but I did one time, and that was enough to tell me my comfort level was not to try to approach, because I had one come at me very rapidly and then stopped way too close, and I thought it was just going to hit me or do something, and it stopped, and then slowly backed away and went back and joined another craft that were just like it, that are what I call the smaller ones, the kind of blue-white luminescence. And for those people out there listening, this may sound like it's really completely mad, and at first it seemed that way to me. But the crafts that you're talking about, that I posted, every now and then I post something for my Facebook friends, and I'll put it up for about a week and take it down, and it's kind of a routine thing. And I say routine because here where we are, we're on some flight paths for the UFOs, and we see them a great deal. And I don't know if you got a copy of the mothership picture that I sent to you.
Yeah, it's up. My producer just let me know right now they are posting the picture of the craft on the desert floor right now. So it'll be up in about 30 seconds. I thought that it was there. The gallery is there. The mothership is there from a distance and close up. We'll discuss that in a second.
That's fine. This type of craft that we're talking about right now was, I didn't know this, of course, at the time. It was seen, the same type of craft. I'm not saying the same one. That type of craft was seen 2 days before in Tempe, Arizona. They were seen. Keep in mind, I'm not saying they're the same craft. I have no way of knowing that, because I suspect these are like a whole series of Jaguar or a whole series of Ford Motor Company cars, that kind of thing, where they have a whole series of craft where they build so many. And I take them to be more scout-type ships, meaning terrestrial rather than interstellar. And I also take the idea, because I've seen them, I've had two that come in frequent here, of these motherships, which are they're very large, they're massive. And
so you're saying
like an aircraft carrier. I kind of think of them that way. The
second picture that we have up in the top row, it looks like there's three. It looks like a triangular craft with another light off to the left. And what you are saying in this picture is that this is one large craft.
Yes.
These are attached.
If the video that I sent will run for those people who are listening to this, there is, what good fortune. I have a very talented and scientifically skilled friend who is many miles to the east of me, who is into telescopic photographic astronomy, and he's an expert at it. And little did I know, as I was taking a photograph of what looks like maybe four craft or two, one off to the left, and then you see three, and kind of a V shape.
Right.
I noticed when it moved, everything was in synchronicity as far as when the one part moved, the other part moved, and this was all photographed, videoed by this astronomer, and that's what's in that video that I sent to you, and it shows my photograph taken right overhead above me, and then him shooting from the east to the west, and you see the star field go by,
right,
and then you see this thing move. I've had things here where you have to watch. I would say this to everyone: if you look up in the night sky, pay attention a little while and see if something moves.
Yeah,
and I don't mean like a satellite coming through, that kind of thing.
Well, and the mothership photograph, which is picture number 3 in the top row, when I look at this, I enlarged this today, and I'm looking at the picture now. And again, everybody, it's right here at jimmychurchradio.com. Oh, by the way, the picture on the desert floor is over on the forums page. It's not on the front page right now. We're getting ready to get that posted on the front page. But if you go over to the forums page, everybody, it's right there. It's in the middle. It says taken on the morning of February 8th, Kingman, Arizona. That's the picture that's on the desert floor. That's over. Okay, but anyway, let's stay with this mothership picture. which is the third picture from the left in the top row, second from the right, third from the left. Now, when I looked at this today, and I enlarged it on my on one of the my largest monitors here at the studio today, I'm not sure what I am. It's a confusing picture. In other words, it doesn't look like a plane. It doesn't look like a flying saucer. It doesn't. It doesn't look like anything that should be floating in the sky. You can see the stars around it. And when you first look at the picture, it looks like just like a star. That's what it looks like. And then you look at it again, and you kind of take a second look. And I blew it up really large on my computer today. And I would suggest we're only going to have this picture up for a short while tonight. This is a copyrighted picture. It's never been published, by the way. Nobody's ever seen it until tonight. Thank you, Harry, for allowing us to do that. I really had to twist your arm today.
My pleasure.
to let you or to let us put this picture up. But I don't know. So you describe. What do you think we're looking at here? I'm going to let you take a crack at it because I can't really make sense of it.
Are you talking about the mothership?
Yeah, the mothership photograph.
Well, that one creeped me out, and I can tell you that I really think I was seeing it better with the naked eye than the little. I had a pocket camera, fixed focus. Okay, so it's like infinity. So it ends up seeing something. It looks more distant when it really isn't. But I didn't notice anything at all at first, and then it moved, and it's like it moved not very far, and it took up a position, and it stayed there. But I don't have any stars here in Arizona, or planetary objects or satellites that can physically move a little distance and then stop.
Right.
And and I've had up to two of these that I'm aware of simultaneously, where one is at much higher elevation than the other, and they kind of sit off from each other a ways, and they just park. And I thought I was seeing things, so I got a camcorder out, and I went out and put up a tripod, and so I just put the camera straight up at them, because they were straight up, and let an hour or so go by, and went out and got it and started running it, and the star field was moving, and they weren't.
It's an incredible picture. Okay, my producer just sent me a message. Okay, everybody, just refresh your screen, refresh the homepage, and now we have the Kingman, Arizona backyard pic is right there in the Harry Drew gallery, and that picture, which is below the mothership. Let me click on this and take another look at it. Okay.
There's a smaller craft, too, that I sent a couple of pictures of. One more distance than I zoomed in a little bit and sent a picture so you can see it better. And
now, this craft, it's just sitting on the desert floor. And this is the thing for me, Mr. Drew, Harry, I want to call you Mr. Out of respect.
Just call me Harry.
Okay. But all of this is just separate. It's separate from the research that you've been doing on the Kingman case. This isn't what you do. You're not out looking for this kind of stuff.
No.
It just has happened to you in recently. And I have to say, this picture that is taken on the desert floor, it's a glowing saucer-shaped craft. And you said, now you have 35 miles of desert in the backyard of your home.
Yes.
And this is sitting about a mile out in your backyard. Is that about a mile? So if this is a mile away, how big is this? It looks like a saucer, I guess, but how large was it?
I frankly don't know, but it's large.
Yeah.
That's why I called it the large one, because there are two other types, and one in my picking system. And you're right, this isn't what I'm doing. This is just what is happening, and it's actually been happening since they found the landing site, including to my consulting engineer, who's had some incredible things happen that I also had happen, and we didn't know about it until after the fact. Some of the same things, and probably the same craft. But this is quite large, and if you see the one that sometimes is branded as a lenticular cloud.
Yeah, I have that. I have that picture here.
Yeah, and I'm a weather spotter for NOAA, and we're all taught how to be able to tell one cloud from the next. And sure, this could possibly be a lenticular cloud. And maybe I'm jumping too far here, but why I'm doing that is the size comparison. You can see the same basic field of view, with the exception there was a bush to the right in the photo. And lenticular clouds require or inform over a rough terrain like mountains with moisture, and they require high winds. And it was about 110 degrees this day, 5% humidity, and pretty much calm. And here's this thing sitting. And that was out a couple of miles, and a mile and a half to 2 miles, and the thing is massive. And what we're talking about that I put up for my Facebook friends was in much closer, and it wasn't as big as that other thing, but it was very large and maybe 75 feet, something like that. I really don't know.
Did you see? Did you see this craft land or take off?
No. Well, yes and no. I say no because the craft that my wife and I watched land in the evening before the morning when this was shot, or the early hours.
Right.
I can't attest to the fact that they're exactly the same ones.
Okay.
But because we had three, I think. Yeah, we had three out back in the about 9 p.m., that kind of thing.
Right.
And
this was the evening.
Been happening, and it goes in some kind of cycle that I haven't been able to figure out. I'm trying to, where they're here, and they're here a lot, and then they're not here at all.
Right.
Just total darkness, and they do weird things.
No, this particular craft that you shot on Tuesday morning, February 8th. I think that was Tuesday morning, Monday morning, Tuesday. What at 3 a.m. Yeah. This was also videotaped. You think it was the same craft that was videotaped in Tempe the night before, or the same night?
I could easily. Well, you know what? Yes, sure. That when I don't know the speed of these, but come on, if you had a light plane, you could make it from Tempe to here pretty fast.
Right.
I did it in just over 3 hours. And in fact, when I left here, I went straight to Tempe before I went to Scottsdale.
Right.
And it was about 3 hours, 10 minutes. And a car using a highway, and they don't have those restrictions, and I'm sure they can do over 125 miles an hour.
Sure. So
it could easily be. I know that in December there were, if I have the date right, and if one of my friends out there can recall for me if it's a listener from the Kingman side, there were 12 UFOs seen taking off from the ground where they had landed on the east side of Kingman, Arizona, and some went south and some went west. They just kind of spread out, and it was reported for the next few days to the local newspaper, the Kingman Daily Miner. People can check this out. What I'm telling you, it's like what I talk about on the Kingman UFO story. I give my audiences information where they can go and prove this to themselves. And that's what's important about what a historian really does. And so what happened that night, I didn't know anything about. There were 12 on the other side of a mountain range from me, but three of them landed here.
Right.
Yeah. So this is what happens. And I would tell you, I'm going to flip a page here at 7:17 p.m. Arizona Mountain Time, and about somewhere during that part of the day on the 8th, you had sent me a notice, and I received a private message, a message in the open that the astronomer is having a large craft, something flashing in the sky, and it keeps coming and going. And that was at 7:17 p.m. on February 8th, and my wife and I went out to our backyard and watched a massive UFO skirt the north side of Kingman, didn't fly over the city, and was flying just a few thousand feet up. And I can't tell you if it was round or flat or pointed, but it went by us, right by us, and I could not get my Nikon camera to take a picture to save myself. I tried. This thing was moving very slow, and the whole front of it, and it'd be like broadside on a 747 body, lit up, and it would pulse on and then go off. Not to be confused with aviation lights. There were planes in the air we could see on the normal flight paths that we're used to, commercial flights with the strobes flashing. This thing wasn't doing a strobe.
Do you think it
turned?
Was it the same craft that you photographed in this picture here that I'm looking at?
No, this is totally something new. I've never seen it before. I don't know what it is.
So you had two.
But I have a hunch I will.
Right. But you had two sightings in the same night. One you photographed, which is the photograph that's here, and the other. But do you don't feel that the two were related? You don't think it was the same craft? It's an incredible photograph, by the way. And the more that I look at it, I thought that the mothership was incredible, and it is. I'm not taking anything away from that picture either, but they're both head scratchers.
Yeah,
and they're
I think they stand well on their own.
Right.
The mothership tops it to me only because it is so creepy.
It is creepy looking.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
And I mean, it reminded me, and this isn't makeup or make believe stuff. This thing reminded me of like a couple of old science fiction series and the way the craft were built, and but this was really there. And there's two of those.
Buck Rogers.
I don't think
Rogers
it mean any harm, but it was like, wow.
Yeah. I was saying, I didn't mean to talk over you. I apologize, but I said Buck Rogers. It's kind of
well.
It's got
not all the sparks and stuff.
No, right, no sparks, but it's got a definite science fiction feel to it.
And we had an instance where, and I don't mean to take you away from this. We'll go wherever you want to go here.
Sure.
I'm your guest, and I'm happy to answer whatever you want to ask. But we were watching a small, what I call the small craft. It's kind of a blue-white, and it just kind of reminds me of like a muffin. I mean, the shape is kind of like a muffin. It's kind of thick along the edges, but it's self-illuminating. And there was one of those, and one of these medium-sized amber kind of vertical looking. It was taller than it was wide, sitting out there. And the blue one may have been just above the ground. The other one definitely was on the ground. And the blue one, we stood and watched, and it just faded away in the darkness. And so naturally we're watching the amber one, and 20 to 30 seconds later, there was a brilliant, almost blinding flash, and there was nothing there. Gone.
Well, how do you...
And so it's like I didn't see anything. I've seen them lift up and fly it across the desert, 20, 30, 40 feet, I mean, not very high. I've seen them all of a sudden lift up and do a really serious fast, like a half-moon arc, and they're out of sight, just like, pow, instantly. So it just kind of, they're capable of doing some things that our craft, our machines can't do. And I consider these so far as machines because of my close encounter. That's the first time I've said that, by the way, and I didn't mean to do that because I don't want to get tangled up with it.
Right. No, and I respect that. I respect that.
Yeah, when the one came up on me in a real big hurry, it alarmed me because I didn't know if it was going to stop. And I was trying to approach to get a better shot and be able to see with my eyes better if there's somebody out and about. And I just had the feeling I was basically told to just back off, and I did. They didn't have to remind me again. And I have mentioned to you, too, there's been time displacement, and that's happened in the day not long ago with another one of the craft, just like the one that I'm not saying it's a lenticular cloud, and I'm not saying it's not, but we have cloud jumpers here.
Mm-hmm.
They're seen in Kingman. They're seen over here. And that's a UFO basically is cloaked in a cloud, and the cloud starts to dissipate, and the UFO leaves it and goes to another cloud. And I think on my site I actually have some video of that happening. And it's perfectly clear what the whole thing. And we came home. I think it was last month. Yeah, I have to turn to my wife to keep track. I can't look at my calendar because I write everything down now. I've got to put dates, times, all this stuff.
I do the same thing with my wife, Harry. It's okay. It's called being married. But what do you think? What do you think, Harry? This is I'm going to ask you directly now. Now this is the devil advocate. You know, I said that earlier today with Hansen, but this is where I just want to. What is it? Because you moved to Kingman because you're a researcher and you're looking into the original 1952 Kingman case.
Right.
But then all of this stuff happened, and it doesn't happen all the time with you. I don't want the people, the listeners out there to think that you're out there every single night photographing UFOs. That's not the case.
No, it isn't.
No, you've only got a couple of photographs. Now, these photographs that I'm looking at here, I'll admit, these aren't your typical, photographs that people, publish and look at my new UFO pic. That's not what these are. These are totally. This is something a little bit different in that they're not standard issue. Okay. And when I look at this mothership picture, it is, I don't know, it's a fabulous picture. I don't know how to explain it. And then the one on the desert floor, I don't know how to explain that. But what is it about Kingman? You moved to Kingman to research.
You want to know?
Yeah, I do.
there's an underground base there.
Okay.
And I know the general location, and the old timers who have accepted me because I've lived here well past a decade since moving here, and then beginning research in 2006, active research, and doing field work, and I mean all the stuff you see on the History Channel. That's the kind of stuff I've been doing, and the old timers began to work on me here back about the middle of 2013. About not going to try to exactly locate the underground base. And then they told me, and they've been right on everything they've told me so far, so I listened. And they told me that years ago there were 3 people that went out and they had an idea, locals, of where this is. And there's a lot of the old-timers, no disrespect to them at all, they're very good people, who know all kinds of things. And because it stays in the family, so to speak. They don't say anything to anybody outside at all. They don't talk to them. They won't admit anything. And so there's a couple of things that they're very uncomfortable talking about, even amongst themselves, at least in my presence. And one was, it's this booming, thudding stuff going on underground that we get, and some kind of field, charged field. You can feel it in places. And the other is the underground base, because 3 went out. They later found the bodies of all 3 dead. And then a few years ago, a couple went out going to the same location. And I know the direction to go. And they've never been seen again.
Well,
so,
you say that you found, you know where this underground base is, and you know how this sounds to everybody listening to the show, and we're all believers. Yeah. I'm a believer. I'm with you, but when
I was confronted by 2 men, there's no military presence here. Let me get that clear for everyone so they know. There's no military presence in Kingman. There hasn't been any military presence as far as a base or any of that type of thing since August of 1945. And that's very important to know, because it actually answers some questions about the Kingman UFO in 1953. But so I'm out working in a place I have every right to be, and it's on an old 1912 wagon road.
Okay.
And I had followed clues given to me by the last living member of the U.S. Air Force retrieval team, and he in my interview with him, I pay attention because I always look at the stories. First off, they can be embellished as they get older, and he was still quite bright in his early 80s, and he mentioned something in passing that was a landmark, and nobody here had a landmark. Nobody's had a landmark, and I knew exactly where to go if I could find that. And it's down this road that goes to the underground base, okay? And I was there doing work. I had my consulting engineer with me, and I heard something coming, and that was unusual because I'd been there before. I go by myself most places, but apparently that's stopped now. I can't do that. But because there's some risk when you go out by yourself in the desert. And that
of course.
So I told the engineer to get down, and he did. And over the hill came like a Hummer, the full size, and two men dressed in battle dress uniforms. And they pulled up to me, and the windows were down, and the driver said gruffly, "What's going on?" And then pointed right at my chest and said, "What are you doing here?" And so I thought, I'm going to get shot or something, because like these guys in the middle of nowhere, and they're obviously some type of
where did they come from?
Something,
where did they come from? What?
That's a good question. See, there's another one. Where did they come from? I haven't the foggiest idea. And when they left, and what I did, I said is, like a simpleton, and honestly, and I'm sure they're probably still mad at me, but I said, "Oh, are you guys hunting?" Because they had these little short automatic rifles, and
right.
And the driver turned to the other soldier. There's no chevron on the shoulder, and there's no name bar, none of that stuff, and he turned and looked at him, and I just imagine he rolled his eyes like the guy at the door is just crazy. And so he just punched it and sprayed me with rocks and sand, because that's what's there on the wagon road, and he went off down right straight to where the road ends, and based on satellite and stuff, and that's where the base is, down at that end. They never came back.
So, okay, now a couple of quick questions. These photographs that are posted at jimmychurchradio.com, those photographs there, the mothership, I don't know what to call the other one, the Star Trek, the cool photograph, and then the one on the desert floor, are these all in close proximity to where you had your run-in with the military, and where you think that this underground base is?
Not at all. No, that's, it's like it really is in plain sight. And no.
Okay.
That's why it's so interesting. And also understand, I'm not the only person that's seeing these things. And but I've had an overabundance of them since finding the landing site. It just really turned up the music loud, as far as getting more and more things happening here. I told you about a very large V-shaped craft.
Yes.
And I had never seen a V-shaped craft. I had never even heard of a V-shaped craft, and I saw it. I don't want to make the story real long, but I thought it was a delta. It was halfway across the valley here toward the mountains to the east, and I'd been out for an evening walk after deprogramming from being out in the field, and I see this thing, and I watch it for 5 minutes, and I'm trying to figure out what it is, and it's daytime, and I realize that this thing is like one thing, not several.
Right.
And I make a dash for the house to get a camera, and I come out, and it's gone, and I'm kind of disappointed because this thing was big, and I turn around to walk away, and this thing cut the distance in half from where it had been toward where my house is. and it made a horseshoe turn, went out around toward the desert side, which is my backyard, so to speak, and made a horseshoe turn, came around, and it's near right at sunset at that point, and it came right up over me at about 400 feet off the ground. There's not a sound. My hair didn't raise up. My clothes didn't catch fire. And I'm looking up at it, and it moved like a hockey puck. That's how it struck me. On ice, it's just like it was sliding along, and it looked like it went sideways. And as it got up close to me where I could actually see it, it did move sideways. And then it did a kind of a rotation to bring the point part around, so it was southwest, and that's when I saw the sky between the two appendages that are the arms that come off the V. And then I realized I'm looking at a V. And the lights, there were 3 lights under it, and there's no distinct rim or edge. It's just really, really fuzzy and extremely brilliant. I'm squinting, wearing polarized dark lenses, which are really something you should be wearing at the latitude I'm at. And this thing then just starts to pull away, and it's not in any hurry. It goes off toward the direction of Needles, California, heading away from my place. I go back into my house, the phone rings, it's my consulting engineer, and he says, "You're not going to believe what happened about an hour ago." And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "I had this massive V-shaped UFO hovering over my house."
Right on.
And I said, "It just left here." We're 75 miles apart.
Right.
Okay.
So it took an hour to
this
travel.
was daytime.
Yeah, it took an hour to travel 75 miles. So it was just cruising. So okay, Harry.
I told you too. I also peeled 3 times.
Okay, let's take a quick break because we'll take a couple of minutes here.
Okay.
And we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about those 44 ETs, 11 UFOs, and the incredible Kingman, Arizona crash landing incident. Okay, everybody stay with us. We are live with Harry Drew from Kingman, Arizona. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. The lines are open. 323-825-5045. And if you need to talk to Harry, I just switched microphones, and you can do all of that live. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. Shoot us an email. Also, all of the photographs that we are talking about are on the front of jimmychurchradio.com. On the homepage is a Harry Drew gallery. Go check it out. We'll be back in a minute with Harry Drew. Stay with us.
jimmychurchradio.com. Jimmy Church. My name is Alan, and I listen to jimmychurchradio.com.
He's always giving it to you straight.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network. Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio, the Revolution.
All right, everybody, welcome back. KJCR, Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, sitting in for Art Bell while we're waiting for Art to come back. And again, Keith, shoot me an email if I can post what Art posted on Facebook. Okay, anyway, welcome. Shoot me an email to Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. Follow us on Twitter at jchurchradio. Sorry about that. And that's it. We are live with Harry Drew in Kingman, Arizona. And I've got to fix that. When I switch in my phone feed, Harry, my microphone sounds different in my ears. I don't know if it's different for everybody else out there, if I sound different. But it sounds different to me. And that's what's going on. I'm engaging that channel. I don't know what the deal is with that. But anyway, Harry, again, welcome, and I'm just honored that you're here because and when you and I were talking earlier in the week,
I think I surprised you a little bit when I said, Harry, I've seen all of your videos, man. You know, and,
brave soul.
Well, you know, because I did some reading and heard about Kingman, but you went out there and handled it a bit different. You went out and it was, and you said it well, Indiana Jones. I'm talking about boots on the ground, desert, brush, snakes, heat, and this incident happened, 50, 60 years ago. There's not, you really have to go out and research and look, because everything is now overgrown or changed or paved over, deliberately changed, by the government, and you unraveled this entire case. So, okay, how did you originally hear about the 52 incident, 1952?
Well, actually, it's because I would come down to this area from where I had a ranch in south central Oregon, and after I would contract out for whatever length of time I wanted, I would go back to my ranch to try to regain my sanity up in the mountains and forests and all of the animals and things that nobody would bother, and nobody could build around me because it was all government land. And so I would come down in this direction, and because I'm a historian, I stopped to talk to people in a museum here, and there was actually a curator who spent 20 years looking for the Red Lake food tank crash site, and he told me some things, and I talked to a chat group, and I thought, I want to find out if this is really just baloney, a myth, a legend, or if there's anything to this, because there was too much detail that I was being told locally that made some sense, and I didn't spend any time, I don't do that as a historian, I don't spend a lot of time going on internet for to read anything, because it's highly unreliable.
Right.
And I didn't go buy all the UFO books that have been made since the beginning of, since the Great Flood. And what I did is I went to research libraries and places like museums and others where the material that they handle hasn't been corrupted, so that I was looking at documentation that was genuine. And in fact, I was in most cases looking at original documents. And can you do that? Of course you can, but it takes it takes a large investment in some cases.
Sure.
Something.
How did you get everybody to open up about this subject? I mean, it's not something that you bring up when you roll into town, and you're ordering, your breakfast at the diner. You don't bring up a UFO crash in 1952.
Yeah. I think a large amount of that comes from the fact that I'm a bona fide historian and an author of history, and my books that I've written on the various histories over the past 40 years are housed at all of the universities and colleges of higher learning in the Western United States, within the state library systems, many of the local places, the humanities department at Stanford, and other prestigious places, and museums, and for those like me who are students of history, because every day we get up, time and history don't stop, and we get up and it's another day in history for us. Whichever way it goes, we have some control of that in most cases. So with that, and talking with a museum curator, and I had curators in my charge, oversaw them as a director, as well as a general curator of museums of history, archaeology, anthropology, and a couple of other things. And so I knew all of the methodology and protocols, and I had a track record that could be verified as being reputable. And here I started with a local museum, and I began going through the research library, and I started with maps starting at 1856 and walked myself forward in time to find out where the roads really were, because as it later turns out, there were claims made by a particular group I referred to. Some are referring to it as the colony. I call them exaggerators, and they talk about things that are supposedly happened with the UFO that and the location and events and all of that. They could not be. Couldn't happen. It was. There are some things that are truly impossible, and that's like moving a UFO down Highway 40 in Arizona going west to cross a bridge that's not there. But that doesn't matter back in 1953 because there was no Highway 40 yet. It wasn't built till 1984. So there are some problems with the basic concepts of the stuff that was being told. And the exaggerators kind of took over, acting in the stead of the government to keep it quiet. And the people here are very patriotic. The history for the Kingman old-timers, the Kingman original citizens are, pardon me, they are very much patriotic. If the military came up, and it was a training facility up until 1945, and the military came up and said, if a flying saucer lands in your front yard, you didn't see it. Well, they wouldn't tell anybody.
Exactly. And so how did you, when I look at these...
The curator as an instance, introduced me to several of the old-timers, and then I come to find out the curator and his whole family are like century families, and that they are the old-timers too. And that's why, in part, why he knew about the Red Lake UFO, Red Lake, Arizona, not New Mexico.
Right.
It's called Red Lake Futang. And that was the first crash, the second UFO during the one 7-day week in May 1953. And two of the crew, well, there were 4-member crews and all the craft. And
hold on. Before we're getting ahead of ourselves.
I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay. That's okay. Let's start picking these numbers apart.
Okay.
Okay, so you have 1 landed, 2 crashed. Okay, yep. So let's start there. But there's 11 UFOs. We're talking 7 days in May. Okay, yep. So we've got 1 landed, 2 crashed. So that leaves another 8. 8 were just sightings. Where did the 1 land? Was that in Kingman? And where were the 2 crash sites that I've seen you? I
won't specify the exact location of the landing site.
Okay.
Because in all probability, because it is an archaeological site, it will be so ordered. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And because what the Air Force, they themselves were using, they left there. When I pulled up after I found the landmark, it was like I had the key to the rest of the puzzle.
Sure.
And I drove straight to it in my Wrangler, got out, and I was parked in front of the fuel kitchen.
Well, I'm just letting you know. I need to find out because I'm driving to Kingman tomorrow, man. I'm going to be right there.
I'm going to end up even having people from the UK here that are in the industry like you.
Okay.
They're interested in getting together, and I'll take them out.
Okay.
But, this place is southeast.
Yes.
Of Old Town Kingman.
Right.
Okay, which is not like the Kingman's much bigger, of course, all after 6 years, and I can tell you that, and it had to be in a place where a General Motors 3301 bus, 36-passenger, technically 40 because of a jump seat that would hold 4, bus could go out on the road, and it's not a 4-wheel drive. It's on old rail and tires. It's very low to the ground. It's got a 503 cubic inch engine that's underpowered for the amount of weight. The bus is, it's really heavy, and loaded with 40 scientists that on the 21st day of May was dispatched after everyone was brought there, including some principal witnesses, and they were taken from Phoenix, and they were taken to what is called Wickenburg, and the Wickenburg Road from Wickenburg to Wickiup, going on west and northwest of Phoenix, was in 1950 a wagon road, and it was under construction 1950 through 53. So it was a graded road, And when it arrived, this became Highway 93 today. Well, not exactly, because the old road still exists somewhere else, and I've been all over it. But so they came up, and they had to be able to get to where this bus could actually drive there to unload the scientists. There were 20 military police with dogs waiting. They had cut a turnaround that's still there for the bus because they were not highly maneuverable. They're like an aircraft carrier probably trying to turn, very slow, and have to back up and keep at it until you finally can turn around. So they did that, and the bus stopped 50 feet from the craft. And
now, this was the landed.
It had already been found.
Harry, is this the landed craft or is this the crash?
Yes, it landed on the 18th day of May.
Mm-hmm.
Within 2 hours, the Air Force retrieval team and military police were on the scene. There were 4 crew members standing outside of a disabled flying saucer. That's what it was. It was identified. It was a flying saucer. And a man by the name of Raymond Fowler, who is a true academic and a gentleman who is still living, was a researcher in UFO.
We all know Raymond, yes.
Yeah, and he had a clipping service. For those that know anything about that, you just clip things out of it. Somebody clips things out of a paper related to topics you like. They get the clippings to you, so you can kind of trace it down. And there was a man at Sudbury, Massachusetts, who was mentioned in a story by a 15-year-old boy who was writing a book about UFOs, and this man, who was a neighbor, said that he had once seen a spaceship, and then said his name, and the first time his name was ever made public was in the newspaper, and there's a zillion stories about what that newspaper article says, and I talked to the newspaper at Sudbury, Framingham, Massachusetts, and they sent me the original reel of microfilm so I could get the information firsthand. Very trusting. And then, of course, I returned it. But it was amazing, the things that have come out of that are written in books and I suspect probably in DVDs and stuff. It's just hyperbole. It's not real. And they had like the first 2 men in the UFO community to do any research on this, and it's like a 15-year-old boy named Jeff. That's not 2 men.
Well,
and it goes on like that, and how the name was concealed, and of course here it is on the front page of the newspaper.
Well,
so,
but when that's okay. So when the craft was actually disabled, it's broken down, and the Air Force, they pull up with all the scientists in the bus, and you were just saying, is this the first 4 ETs of the 44 that you reported?
It's the first 4. They were in perfectly good condition.
Okay,
there was nothing wrong. The craft didn't have, per witness interview, didn't have even a scratch on it. Something had affected some type of avionic or flight control system or propulsion. And the scientist who inspected that part of the craft, who was also had a degree in mathematics, a physicist, and an engineer, and he was basically what we would call the bomb blast effect analyst at Frenchman Flat nuclear bomb testing in Nevada. He'd been flown there after being at Wright-Patterson for 12 years. This guy really existed. All of his background was checked out by Raymond Fowler. Raymond Fowler did an impeccable job verifying who this guy is, and so I felt it's very comfortable with all of that. And so he was taken by, they called the MPs called the people off the bus one by one. They had a roster, and they escorted them to a place that had something to do with their field of specialty. And so he got to inspect and try to determine the rate of fall and forward speed of impact. And he couldn't understand why the craft was uninjured and the rate of fall was below the natural rate of when you drop a pin out of your hand to the floor, it falls at 32 feet per second. It just does. And if you're high enough, you can do like the guy did that cracked the sound barrier jumping out of a balloon.
What did they do? What did they do with the craft? This is craft number 1 of the 3.
It took 4 days to assemble the equipment to move it, okay? Because Kingman didn't have anything. It's miners and some loggers that were cutting logs up in the hills, and then retail. But mining is the principal thing. It actually still is. And so this wasn't something that the military could conceal, and it was a stroke of good luck, almost magic, that Camp Irwin, California, which had been designated infantry training, changed its designation in 1951 to armor. And it gave them everything to pick up and move tanks that were battle damaged and that kind of thing. And it was 235 miles away. It's a long way, but they've got everything that's needed. They could build pontoon bridges.
I got it. So they dispatched the engineers and the convoy from Fort Irwin. They drove
it all through the town in the middle of the night.
Right.
There's no way you can do it, a 40-ton M25 tank transport to Old Town Kingman.
Right.
Only two roads in and out.
Where did they
that caused the sheriff to go out.
Where did they transport it to? Do you know where it went to?
Yeah, of course. I not only know where it went, I know which way they left with it.
Well,
I've done the route.
Okay, so okay. Where was its ultimate destination? And then let's get to these the two crash sites, because this was the landed one. I'm
That's
confused.
The landing one. That was on the 18th.
Right.
They handed off the intact craft loaded on an M40 tank transporter at the back, literally, of Hoover Dam. That's where it went. And it went cross-country. M25 was designed to drive off not on paved roads. There was no Highway 40 in 1953 or a bridge, and they couldn't cross what is called Davis Dam, which is a dirt dam. The craft and the 40-ton transporter would have destroyed what little road there is of dirt on a dirt dam. So they had to take it up, and they couldn't cross the dam. It was too wide. So Corps of Engineers was waiting, no kidding, and they barged that thing across in the dark. And that was the early wee hours of May 22, 1953, and the retrieval team handed it off. They have no more to do with what's going on with the craft. The aliens were gone within the hour when they were first found standing next to the craft on the 18th of May. They're top secret. And so as the retrieval team was returning, down came the Red Lake craft. It ricocheted off of a rocky butte, and as a result, gutted the craft out. Two of the four-member crew, it impacted across the reservoir called Futang. Two of the crew had severe injuries to their lower legs, the limbs, and they were taken to Nellis. They died there. The other two that survived were taken on to what is Groom Lake, wasn't called Area 51, and that facility was under construction and development in a big hurry because it was an annex to Edwards Air Force Base. It was handed off to them in 1951. And this is all for real. They were using black budget money. They got congressional open money in 1955. So
right.
But after that, I'm done with that part, just like the retrieval team. And so here you are, within 1 mile of the road that they were on to take the craft up. This thing goes down. And rancher Leonard Neal, who came up in the late 1800s into Kingman and settled a large amount, kind of like a land baron, and 11 other people watched this craft come down, ricochet off the butte, and slam into the desert floor at Red Lake. And the Air Force swept the area twice. They removed the craft. It was pretty much garbage because of it hit this whole butte. It's pure rock, and it's full of snakes, by the way. And I've been up it more than I'll ever want to do again. And then they had 2 days to get it out of there. It wasn't a big deal. They told the military went to the rancher's house who volunteered to, because they watched it go down, to take them over and show them. And he was ordered to go back in the house and not come back out. Period. Not to come down. This, it's obviously it was some kind of military thing.
Right.
And so
Well, how many ETs? How many ETs were involved?
There were 4.
Again?
4 and 4. The one that hit the mountain, two of the ETs were killed immediately.
Right.
And the other 2 were wandering around when they were found by the Forest Service worker. They were disoriented.
Okay.
And the Air Force was on the other side of a fire that was being beaten with wet gunny sacks. It became big news. It was front page for a week. It was out of control. It got really big. It's all forests. And so the Air Force is dragging out pieces and 2 corpses. They now had 4 corpses. And there's a story about them and where they went and all of that I have. It's just one more facet of this. But on the day the bus came, I'm going to back everybody up to 21 May, when the scientists came, and the bus, driven by Dennis, by the way, know his name, and arrived at the site of the downcraft that landed. They did not know that 5 flight minutes away, at early in the morning before the bus arrived, 10 a.m., 3 men, one was a pilot who was contracted to train U.S. Air Force pilots at 3 air bases in Arizona, fighter pilots, one pilot who was a civilian pilot, and the sports editor for the Prescott Daily Courier newspaper were all there because of a thing they were doing for youth, and they had no idea that off in the distance to the northwest was a flying saucer sitting there with military police and all this stuff. And the military didn't know about these guys, and they look up, and there are 8 of these UFOs, and 2 are one at each end of 6, and they're hovering, and the other 6 are doing aggressive dogfight maneuvers. For over an hour, they watched them do this. This is on the front page of the Prescott Daily Courier newspaper in detail.
This is incredible. Now, were they
5 minutes away?
Were they all
craft?
Were they all the same type of craft too? By the way,
yes. These were terrestrial. They were like scout ships, and they went from here to there. This craft, the latest story I've seen is a new book by somebody, and I wouldn't say if I knew. That's out. There's always another story. There's been a big jump in the Kingman interest since I started out a year ago to start letting information out. And these craft were just think of them as shuttles, basically, or that kind of thing. But they were not shot down by missiles. They weren't knocked down by lightning storms. I have the weather reports, both weather reports that go back to 1901, and the weather was perfect that entire week, and that's why the 2 that were found at the scene of the fire, the disc made when they hit the mountain, were taken in as suspects of arson because there was no other way the fire could start.
Right.
Lightning and that kind of stuff.
Was there some kind of communication going on between our military and these crafts? Were they allowed to? I mean, were they here with us? I don't understand why they were just doing these maneuvers over the desert and we weren't doing anything about it unless we knew they were there.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a tough one in a way. It's like one of the things that I don't do is I try not to influence people by giving them my opinion. I talked to a very long-time respected individual within the community, and they said it's fair to speculate, sometimes, and I make sure that I tell people, just like I tell them when I interview people, it's as told to me. I didn't make this up. This is something somebody tells me, and when they give me a clue, and I find a site that has everything that confirms, including relics that are datable, that are under military contract, that are the exact right date, then I really have found the place.
Right.
The landmark and the proof, and I don't have to find the UFO. I wish, but, they took it.
Right. Harry, let's take a little break. We're at the bottom of the hour. And then when we come back, I want to talk about the relics, and I want to talk about the actual landing site. And I want you to tell me how I can go out there with you. We'll be back. We'll be back right after this. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. You're listening to Harry Drew out in Kingman, Arizona. Shoot us an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. We'll be back right after this. There's a lot more to this Kingman story. We'll try to get it all in before the end of the show on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Don't touch that mouse, everybody. We'll be back. Give me 2 minutes. I got to get a drink. All right, everybody, welcome back. KJCR, JimmyChurchRadio.com. Live from Kingman, Arizona, Harry Drew. Now, shoot us an email, Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. I just want everybody to understand something really quick before we continue with this Kingman case. The pictures that Harry has provided us tonight at JimmyChurchRadio.com are going to be taken down. I don't own these pictures. And I had to talk Harry into, and I'm not kidding about this. Harry, back me up now.
That's true.
I really wanted everybody to see these pictures today. And Harry's got a book that isn't finished yet. These are pictures that are going to be published. They've never been published or never been seen before. So we are allowed to have these up. At 10 o'clock tonight, the show's over. I have to take these pictures back down. That was the agreement that I made with Harry. So before we continue on, Harry, I just want everybody to have a little opportunity to look at these pictures again. They are extraordinary. Let's just take a couple of minutes. I just want to go through these one more time because that's it. They're going to be down after the show tonight. And you know what's funny, Harry? The replay of the show, we do a best of and a replay, and then it's going to go up on YouTube. They are going to be so bummed.
Yes.
Unless they're here right now. Seriously, they're going to be like, where are these really cool pictures? Well, you know what? Right now, they're in the gallery at JimmyChurchRadio.com. Go check it out. Now, I want everybody to understand, the reason why I'm doing this is while we finish out the Kingman conversation over the next 20, 25 minutes, they can go and look at these pictures and check it out while we're finishing up the Kingman story. And again, thank you for allowing these pictures to be here. Now, the first picture that I'm talking about is picture number 2 on the top row. JimmyChurchRadio.com. Just go down to the Harry Drew gallery. The second picture from the left, you'll see four. It looks, I don't know. When they're small, they look like stars. It's one, and then like a little diamond shape. That is one craft. That is not 4 independent things. That is one craft. And I don't know how to explain it. But, Harry, that's extraordinary, and I wish I was there to see it myself. Now, the third picture, or the second picture, but it's the third one from the left in the top row, that is, we don't have a description for it, but the only thing I can say is sci-fi type of craft, and I don't know how large it is, but when I blew it up today, it's got this crazy shape to it that looks like Star Wars. You know, you said to me earlier today, Battlestar Galactica, and I'm saying Buck Rogers, Star Wars, X-Fighter thing. I don't know, but that is a crazy looking picture. And I don't know how to explain it, but everybody go and look at that. We're going to take the pictures down in 25 minutes. And then the third picture is the last one in the bottom row, third picture from the left in the bottom row. And that was taken on Tuesday morning, 3 a.m. This week in Kingman, Arizona. And that picture is a mile and a half out in back of Harry's house, sitting on the desert floor. Did you zoom in on your camera when you took this, or is this just straight off the camera?
Well, we're a little more elevated as far as the geography.
Yeah.
And that's required because of flood control and that kind of thing when you're in the desert.
Right.
You know, so it gives you an advantage. It's kind of like...
oh, we lost you, Harry. Plug in your headset.
Stand by.
Oh, but it's just an incredible picture. I the more that I look at it, I'm
in a position where I can also get up on a portion of the structure here.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And even out on the patio, we can sometimes we do that where we have a lounger that's you could probably park your car on. It's very strong, and it's about 5 feet wide, and it's high up.
Right.
So you can sit on it, kind of like a chair, with your feet off over the edge. It's about leg high from knee to foot, and you can stand up on it too, and then you get kind of a view over some of the. I hate to do this to people that have been having this all the snow and ice, but over the blooming fruit trees, you know, and that are somewhere in the immediate backyard. But beyond that, ladder, and then basically the observation deck, which is over my studio. So.
Yeah, I am so jealous.
It's an elevated site to begin with.
Yeah, the thing is about these pictures, as I look at them, you know, there are people out there that are looking to the skies and their entire lives with cameras, and you know, hope to take something like this once in their life and have the experience. And I look at I just wish I was that guy, and I'm talking to that guy. I mean, I just don't know what to say. This Battlestar Galactica pic is just too cool. And you know, the desert floor one, as I look at it, Harry, and then let's just move on. We got to finish this Kingman story, the Kingman incident. Yeah, but that desert floor pic, man. I don't know how you refrain from jumping in the Jeep and hightailed it across the desert and chase those guys down.
I mainly do it because of the one run-in I had with the small. Well, there were two different types of craft, and what I call the medium. It's actually pretty large. That's more vertical than it is horizontal in the way it's made.
Right.
So it's taller, much taller than the other one. But when one of those two smaller ones made a very rapid dash at me and closed the distance between us so quick that you get that kind of a sudden alarm that goes off that you're about to get hit by a train
yeah.
or something.
Right.
And that's the way it was. And so I got the drift. You know, I thought maybe...
Just leave them alone?
Yeah, hold my position.
Right.
I did, you know, and they aren't doing anything to me, and I don't think there's anything I can do to them, you know.
This
so we have a happy arrangement.
The Star Trek pick, the Battlestar Galactica pick number 2. What did it ever get closer than this, or did it? You know,
Oh yes. I we go out with. I go out without a camera, just like everybody else, without one, and sometimes things happen so fast there's no way you can get the camera. And then I think I told you that I also have instances, and my wife and I had one here where we had one of these things in the day, and we pulled in with a Jeep, and I literally unlocked the door, rushed in, grabbed my camera. We went out the other door to get to where we could go to the back, and the thing was gone. And a small cotton ball-sized looking piece of cloud that had been there vanished. And so we walked out around an inner fence, because I'm on horse property and it's multiple fences, cross fence kind of thing. And so we go out around a corner of one of the internal fences, and I see one cloud left. It's about 3 miles away. There isn't another cloud in the sky. And so I decide I'm going to set my Nikon to burst shoot, so it just keeps shooting. I hit the trigger, it just shoots, because I think this thing is in the cloud. And I'm setting my camera, and I look up to the left, and the cloud's gone. And I asked my wife, tell me, how long do you think we've been standing here? And she said, oh, maybe 2 minutes. And I said, 35 minutes just went by.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. And there were no clouds. They were gone. And so was the craft.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any pictures. And I'm standing there 35 minutes after all I did is tilted my head down to look at the big screen at the back of the camera.
Right. How many pictures were taken? How many? How many pictures were taken in that 30 minutes?
Oh, how many could I have taken?
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah, exactly.
I never even got to shoot one.
All right. Well, let's get back to the Kingman case.
Okay.
Again, everybody, these pictures are coming down in 20 minutes. So just go and check them out. 20 minutes, they are gone. Enjoy the Harry Drew Gallery. And again, Harry, I know that you were a little bit hesitant and for allowing this to happen, but I really do appreciate it. And everybody else.
My pleasure. I decided you're the man with the show where I can do that.
I'm the lucky man.
Enjoys them.
I'm the lucky man with the show. Let's make that very clear. Okay, so now let's get back. Okay, so now where we left off, we've got 8 craft out over the desert that made it to the front of the Prescott newspaper. They were dogfighting out over the desert, and now
within sight of the saucer sitting on the ground that belonged to them.
Now now how many witnesses were there to this particular incident? Because obviously, if it made it to the front page news,
there were just 3 men who saw this happen. But keep in mind, all the way through this, they had no idea there was a flying saucer on the ground anywhere. They were actually out checking a place they had stocked with fish for a fishing doobie for youth, and that's why they were where they were. And so they drove out, dirt road, and it's 1953. And at 10 a.m., they're standing there hobnobbing. One of them was actually a former military fighter pilot who was under contract at that moment as the fighter pilot, the man who trained fighter pilots at 3 air bases in Arizona. One was a private pilot who was a townsperson from Prescott, and one was the sports editor for the Prescott Daily Courier. And of course, I know everything about these men and the family and when they passed away, where and how, and all of the things that a historian does. So it's like you end up with, and I'm not a government man, but you end up with a history, a dossier, a record of everybody involved in these things. That's why I know that Dennis was driving the bus, and after the bus was sent out of Camp Irwin, later today is known as Fort Irwin, the bus was transferred over by Monterey, California, where the driver named Mike drove it to Camp Roberts from Fort Ord every weekday. So I know what happened to the bus, and where it went, what it looked like, and even the number on the bus, which I haven't released to anybody, but so it's like checking all these things out. So they saw that the Air Force crew are busy getting ready for the scientists to come and examine the craft. And some people have said, well, they were told initially, the scientists were told initially, the bus, by the way, had the windows taped over with tape to block their view. So the blacked out windows.
Right.
And they were all given sack lunches and a drink and loaded in the bus, and they took off, and it's got the windows partially, whatever they would open with the tape, because there's no air conditioning on those buses. And it would get stuffy and a lot of smoke because they smoked. And so when they got to the site, the Air Force was there telling them that this was a super secret U.S. Air Force experimental airplane. I would have asked, because we live in a different age than 1953. In 1953, people trusted the government emphatically.
Right.
Everything.
Right. The opposite of today. Yes.
Yeah, and now we question, and part of it's education, and part of it's pretty obvious why we do it, and I'm not going there. But so they accepted that, and one scientist or the engineer that Raymond Fowler interviewed accepted the answer for 2 weeks until he went to a drive-in movie theater, and there was a newsreel, because you used to get updates on news and newsreels at the theaters, and here was the colonel that gave him all the secrecy oath aboard the bus, and he was part of Blue Book. And then he realized he actually saw a UFO.
Right.
He wasn't looking at a super secret Air Force job.
Right.
Yeah, and but the military had to wait until the scientists left. The scientists would have gone to a hangar to look at an experimental aircraft. They wouldn't have gone out in the middle of the sticks.
No, of course not.
Underneath it and all this stuff.
Of course not.
Today, anyway,
Well, and there's, I remember my father was in the military, and I grew up on various Army bases around the world, around the country, and I remember one thing that happened in the 60s, and it kind of started to trail off around 1970. I doubt they do it today, but in the 60s, 1965, 66, 67, 68, 69. Excuse me, hold on. I had to clear my throat. I'm getting over a cold. But anyway, when I believe it was at 5 o'clock, 4:30 or 5 o'clock, they would play the national anthem on loudspeakers on the Army base. And everybody that was walking out. Now, if you were driving in a car, that was your get out of jail free card. That was your hall pass. But if you were walking on the street, man, woman, child, officer, wife, it didn't matter. You stopped and you put your hand over your heart and you faced where the music was coming from until
Absolutely.
It stopped. Yeah, and I took pride in that. You
described Kingman, 1953, the populace.
Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. This was reality. Today, people just don't even come close to understanding a conversation like that. They don't get it. But that was the mood of the country. You respected that. And when the military said something or the police said something and told you something, you did it. You respected it, and you didn't question it, and Absolutely. That was it. It was just a way of life. It wasn't militaristic. It wasn't some dominant thing about society in the military. It was about respect for the government, and that was it. And I'm telling you right now, I remember that like it was yesterday. You're walking down the sidewalk, boom, and they were taking down that flag, and they were playing the national anthem. You stopped what you were doing until they were done, and you didn't dare move.
That's true.
You didn't move. You didn't want to be the guy that moved first. So
that's true.
Yeah, and
you did describe the populace in 1953, Old Town, 3,400 people in Kingman, Arizona, who were extremely patriotic. They had an Army Air Corps base here that trained for B-17s and fighter pilots. Were here to pretend they were like Luftwaffe or something, and to train side gun and turret machine gun operators and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so there was a lot of secrecy going on. So they naturally were secret about everything. They had blackouts. They were, actually, I was told they were actually martial lawyer, but if nothing else, it was very close to that. And they went through blackouts and the whole thing. So when someone said, do this, they did it. They didn't question. And the other, they were totally 100% American citizens and patriots in the as much as you could be one. And so the things that went on, there were some complaints by some people about the underlying cause why the UFOs went down, and kind of surfaced a little bit when flights of birds would suddenly be killed in flight. And the same thing that knocked down the craft caused that, and that's my opinion. That's just my opinion, and it's based on the fact that there were 3 highly overpowered microwave short pulse radar units set up because we were in the middle of the Cold War, and they were trying to find some way to cope with the new Russian or Soviet Union bomber that could carry the new Soviet Union atomic bomb over the polar cap and come down and bomb the United States. And it only had radar land radar only had a distance of 25 miles then. And they were trying to build a stopgap to where they could overpower radar until a new generation was produced. And they tested 3 here, and they set them up in a triangular position. And right in the middle was the flight path for UFOs. One morning they switched it on, and down came UFOs.
So you think that?
Oh, I'm sure. And I've not checked yet, but I'm going to. I'm going to try to find out if there's like any kind of record of an increase in brain tumors and all. They had to irradiate the operators, the what's called side and back lobe leakage off of the short pulse microwave radiation was intense. They created without knowing it because they didn't have any way to test things. They just said, add more power, turn it up, see what happens, and they didn't realize they were creating like HARP.
Right. And so now you mentioned relics earlier. Can you disclose what you have found on location? At least give me one cool thing.
Say that again, please.
You said you found some relics at the crash site.
Oh, yes. Well, there was a number of things made for the military that were by military contract that were made, that were made in 1951 and 52. I'm at a 1953 site. They were only made in 1951 and 52. There were hundreds of them. Okay, and
what were they? What were some of the?
One of them was doesn't sound like any big deal, except it's traceable. It was a metal can that had no lead-based solder on any of its seams. It was a experimental double crimp seam can that contained they could put anything in it, but it was what they were using in the fuel kitchen was condensed milk. That sounds simple. Well, all cans are that way. No, they weren't. And people were getting problems affecting their central nervous system because of lead solder being used in tin cans up until then. So in 1953, there had been people using tin cans for half a century, and younger people getting brain damage from it. And so there were those type of things. Some of the other, it's like rations. I don't know if you've ever seen anything. I know that I was in the Army and at one point, and we still had somewhere in some building they found where there were Korean War rations, and so they were feeding them to us. They were dreadful. And but the cans aren't like anything you go find when you go into a store.
Yeah, but why would they be in the desert? Yeah, why would they be in the desert in Kingman?
Well, they were
unless there was a military presence
they set up
there
for 4 days.
Yeah,
and they brought in. They had 20 military police. They had to bring in engineers. They were trying to pick this craft up. that was sitting at a 15-degree angle, sitting 20 inches into the ground, where it landed in a very slow drain field off of the Wallapai Mountain. It's May, 4 inches below the hard-packed surface is water. And it was the weight of the craft, and the engineer specialist that tried to figure out why it wasn't damaged and why it sank 20 inches from the impact didn't know he wasn't standing on a perfectly flat, hard-packed desert. He was standing in a very slow drain field off of an 8,256-foot high mountain. And it's right where the mountain meets the desert floor. And that's what was going on. So that gives you a clue where it is.
And this is one of the funnest conversations I've ever had with any guest, and I have to thank you for that. Now, really quick, because we're up against it, we're almost finished. I know you used to. Do you still do tours of the
yes,
crash site? Now, the link that we have for you at jimmychurchradio.com, that takes you to your website. So is there information there that anybody would like to, go and a guy like me, I can go out and check out the Kingman crash site?
Right now, I'm not taking no one's going out to the main landing site. There's no one been taken there.
You're keeping it to yourself?
It's an archaeological site.
That's not right.
Yeah. I took one group, which is kind of magic. I took one group with Top Secret Tours who works with me, and so I do it through them.
Right.
And I took a group out I took them to some places, including where the two ETs vanished right under the nose of the police inside of a vault.
Right.
And all these other places that are central to the story. And then I took them to the Red Lake food tank crash site, and we stood around and I showed them pictures of the area taken by some special equipment that I've told you a little bit about. I won't mention here, that I was able to help ground terrain from a different way than is possible normally. And so I could find exactly where everything was. And so I showed them these things, and they were looking at the pictures, and we all stopped, and they looked up and around, and they gasped. They were really there, And I mean, it's plain as the nose on your face. Once you have somebody, me, tell people, and that's, like I said already, like when I speak at a conference or I have 2 DVDs that are limited edition, and trust me, that when they're gone, because I have a new thing coming in August. A theatrical preview is the 15th of August. And, but it talks about these things and things that you can go and check for yourself. But I don't send anybody out unaccompanied because there is a risk of injury.
Sure.
We have 11 of the 15 poisonous creatures in the state of Arizona. There are javelina in large numbers where the craft that landed, and mountain lions and rattlesnakes. And you also have considerations as far as some property is private, some is not, and so you can't be in a position where you're trespassing on other people's property. So the best way to handle it was I just used Top Secret Tours, and they can make arrangements with them, and Top Secret Tours calls me, and I'll take a group out. The Southwest tour that Top Secret Tours runs is like 9 days, and they start like at Roswell and come this direction. So, well, but yes.
Okay, so they can get to
the landing site. I would take you there, but it's not open to the public.
Okay, well, no, but your back porch is, and I'm going to drive out there, and we're going to take some pictures in that night sky. Thank you for coming on, Harry. I had one of the best times ever, and if you need to contact Harry, you can do that through his website, also through his Facebook page. The links are there at jimmychurchradio.com. And that's it, Harry. I got to close out the show.
Thanks a lot. Good talking to you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, Harry Drew. Yeah, the microphone does sound different as soon as I shut that off, Keith. I got to figure that out. I think it has to do with the auxiliary bus, but we will figure that out. Okay, listen, everybody, really quick. We've just got a few minutes left. The pictures at jimmychurchradio.com, I don't own them. They've never been published before. If you want to check that out, we're going to pull them down. Go and look at them again. It's the mothership, the Battlestar Galactica crazy pic number 2, and then the bottom row is the picture of the saucer that is sitting on the desert floor. Those are going to be up for a few more minutes at jimmychurchradio.com in the gallery. And that's about it now. Also, don't forget, this Tuesday, Richard Dolan himself is flying in from the East Coast to be on this program. We are going to broadcast live from Studio City, California, in front of a live studio audience for his book release. We've got, it's going to be about 200 people. Now, if you want to attend, you live in the Los Angeles area, I want to meet you. Come hang out with us. It is going to be a live broadcast. Richard's going to sign books. He's going to hang out. He's going to do the entire 3-hour show. It's going to be incredible. Right there at jimmychurchradio.com is a link and a little ad on the right-hand side of the page. Click on that. There's the time, place, address, how to get tickets, and everything. Okay, now that's it. It's going to be this Tuesday from 7 to 10. This program broadcasts live every night from 7 to 10. It's the same situation, except we're pulling up the stakes, we're moving the studio, we're going mobile, and we're heading down to Studio City, California, which is about 2 miles from here, by the way. And that's it. It is going to be an extraordinary, once-in-a-lifetime thing. You are never going to be able to see something like this again, and I want to meet everybody out there. Okay, if you live in Los Angeles, come out and see the show live and meet Richard Dolan and hang out. All right, that's it. I am out of here. I got to get... Producers are in my ear. We are done. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Up next, Spooky South Coast with Tim Weisberg, 50th Beatles anniversary show. I'll see you tomorrow night. Robert Schock, live in the studio tomorrow night. How old is everything? You're going to find out tomorrow night. I am out of here. See ya.